You ready? Ready to go? Good morning. The hearing on the Committee of Agriculture is entitled State of Rural Economy. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue will come to order. I've asked David Scott to open us with a prayer. David?
Sure. Bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before your throne of grace to, first of all, say thank you. We thank you for so many blessings that you bestow upon us, many which we don't even know. On this occasion, we ask a special blessing on our agriculture industry, and that your blessings come upon our new Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. Dear Heavenly Father, finally, we thank you for your Holy Spirit. For oftentimes we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but your Holy Spirit intercedes for us with groanings that cannot be uttered. We thank you for that, and we ask your Holy Spirit to enter this room today. These and other blessings we ask in your Son, Christ Jesus' name. Amen.
David, thank you. Well, Mr. Secretary, welcome. You and I have had several conversations before this morning, but let me officially congratulate you on becoming our nation's 31st Secretary of Agriculture. We're excited about working with you and couldn't be happier with the President's selection of Sonny Perdue to be our next, the current Ag Secretary. So we're eager to work with you. We also know that you have a great heart and concern for America's farmers and ranchers. We know that you have both the policy and political acumen to get a lot of things done at the agency. In short, I don't think there's a better man for the job of Secretary of Agriculture in these challenging times. While it took some time to get you confirmed, I want to commend you for landing on your feet and going full throttle right from the very start. I greatly appreciate you weighing in with the administration on the vital importance of trade to our nation's farmers and ranchers, particularly regarding Nafta. Your work to begin reining in the waters of the U.S. Regulation, putting in place a new rule that fully respects private property rights, federalism, and no fewer than 3 Supreme Court rulings is critical to helping dismantle this attempted federal land grab. Your successful support of the issuance of an executive order by the President to revisit the myriad of regulations affecting American agriculture could not be more appreciated. And again, thank you for taking on these other challenges. Restoring some common sense in the school lunch program and putting the brakes on harmful regulations that would threaten long-standing livestock marketing arrangements and would force organic producers to comply with overly prescriptive animal protection welfare practices are also welcome actions. As you begin the work of implementing federal biotech labeling requirements, I hope that you exercise the same kind of prudent judgment. Thank you for your role in helping ensure that the United States fully enforces its trade laws, including those against Mexico's illegal dumping of sugar into the U.S. market. I also want to underscore the importance of your leadership in working with USTR to continue building the case against China's domestic support and TRQ administration for corn, rice, and wheat. If we are to regain America's confidence in trade, we must hold our trading partners accountable for their commitments. On the topic of the importance of trade, you announced this week that you're embarking on a reorganization of the Department of Agriculture, which would include an undersecretary focused solely on trade. I look forward to hearing more about your ideas on how to make the department even more effective in the important work that it does every day, even if it does so within the confines of tighter budgets. As we look to the budget, I think it's important to point out that our current farm bill is expected to save $23 billion over 10 years, but the most recent CBO projections show that the 2014 farm bill is actually now targeted to reduce spending by some $104 billion, nearly 4 times that anticipated. This is an achievement made possible by the hard work and determination of the members of this committee and our counterparts in the Senate. Mr. Secretary, I hope and trust that you will make sure that the President knows about this and that he makes tough choices as he makes tough choices on the allocation of scarce budget resources. As you know, Americans and farmers and ranchers have seen their net incomes cut in half over the last 4 years. Times are difficult on the farms and ranches across this country these days, and if those who are paid to make forecasts about these things are correct, economic times in the farm and ranch industry will not be any better over the next several crop years. It's my experience in farm and ranch country that a bad farm economy can adversely impact the entire economy, while a good farm economy can boost the nation's economy and job creation. It's also my experience that strong U.S. farm policy not only sees our farmers and ranchers through hard times, but it mitigates the adverse impacts on the national economy and jobs. Thus far, we've had a safety net in place that is largely working as intended, with the exceptions of cotton and dairy. America's cotton farmers and the entire industry have rallied around a way to mend their safety net to make it more effective in mitigating the effects of China's and India's predatory trade practices. We believe that you have the legal authority to effectuate this policy, and I would urge you with the utmost urgency to exercise that authority. As you know, Congress would have done this a couple of weeks ago, but for a recklessness of a couple of folks in the other chamber, it didn't happen. And we will continue to state that over and over. It was reckless and inappropriate. And while the dairy industry continues working on a unified approach to mending its safety net, I believe there's ample opportunity for you to help them as well, as did your predecessor. If we can thread these two needles, we'll be in a much better position to deliver on the President's promise of a strong farm bill passed on time. And with that, I'll recognize my friend and ranking member for any comments that he has.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very pleased to welcome Secretary Perdue to the Agriculture Committee. It took a while for you to get here, but it's nice to see you've hit the ground running, and now that you're at USDA, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we're ready to work with you. The administration has been in need of someone who understands farm programs and their impact on rural America. Hopefully, now that you're there, you will get them to reconsider some of the proposed $4.7 billion in cuts to USDA that were outlined in the March budget. I know you weren't part of that, and I just don't think that anyone in the White House really understood what these cuts would mean to rural America. This hearing is focused on the rural economy. And as you're well aware, and everybody is, the rural economy is trending downward. We had a pretty good year last year, relatively high yields that kept things afloat in spite of the fact that the prices aren't what they should be. But I worry that we could find ourselves in real trouble if we have an ordinary year or somewhat of a down year this summer. So this is why it's so important that the Farm Bill safety net be set right. So I'll be looking forward to your thoughts on what you think needs to be done in the next Farm Bill, and what your role, what you anticipate the role of the administration is going to be in that process. The Farm Bill is just one of the many topics I expect us to cover today. I know our members are looking forward to hearing from the Secretary. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so our witness may begin his testimony and ensure there's ample time for questions. With that, I'd like to welcome to our witness table the Honorable Sonny Perdue, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chairman Conaway, and thank you, Ranking Member Peterson. It's a delight to be with you this morning. I look up there on the podium and see my good friend, Mr. Scott, who kind of showed out at my confirmation hearings, if you all are not familiar with that. But thank you again, David, for those very kind remarks there. And I see some other Georgia homeboys here with you today as well. But my staff was a little concerned, since this was our first date and I hadn't got a chance to meet all of you, that they had about 15 pages of prepared remarks. But I'm going to not do that to you all. You can read my remarks in the written record, but I just really want to share a few things with you. You've indicated correctly that 2017, 2018 is a very different economic situation for our farm community and our rural communities across this land than it was when the 14 Farm Bill was promulgated. So we've got some challenges ahead. Our budget situations are challenging, but I think together we can do that. I'm excited about being at the department. What I've found is a cadre of hardworking, dedicated career people over there, not ideological, but they're passionate about American agriculture, how we can make it better. My goal, and I've stated internally and externally, is to make you as the Committee on Agriculture here in the House proud of the way the USDA is run. My goal is to make it the most effective, most efficient, the best managed, the best value agency in the United States government. We had an opportunity in Georgia to do some of that. We've begun already in looking at that, and I know some of your questions will want to hear about my ideas for reorg, or I really call it realignment today. I look forward to hearing those and answering those. But the challenges we face now, you know that our farm economy is down about 50% drop in net income from where it was in 2013 as you all were looking and contemplating the 14 Farm Bill. We've got several members, particularly younger farmers, have levered up in this situation where the revenue is not supporting their debt structure, and they're in some dire straits that way. So the safety net that you all referred to and have worked very well, as you said, without maybe a couple of situations that we can improve on, has been a safety net. Our crop insurance combined with the ARC and PLC programs, I think, have been worked very well generally. But we're in some dire straits out there, and the government payments total almost $13 billion in 2016, and based on those great yields that Chairman or Ranking Member Peterson talked about that we can't continue to depend on, it's going to be less than that in 2017. So the crop insurance, again, has been a good support. But the other thing is rural development has been a wonderful program. What I've learned about USDA, how vast, how broad, how helpful it can be in rural America overall. That's why I was glad to see and glad to participate with the President in his signing of the executive order of interagency working together, determining what are those barriers to American agriculture and how can we eliminate those and mitigate those for the prosperity of rural America. It's not just the producers. You know, if farms aren't doing well in our rural communities, those rural communities don't do well. So we're looking at how we can help those thrive as well, and I look forward to explaining my vision for rural development upon your questions. So you also know that USDA provided approximately 243,000 loans to $35.2 billion dollars to farmers and ranchers. That led to a full utilization of the program level for fiscal year 16, and with record loan levels at $6.3 billion. So those are the kind of things that we think will help the safety net out here. And I look forward to engaging with you personally here today, but also in your offices and your phone calls about the issues that pertain to your constituents in the ag community, so together we can resolve their concerns, their fears, their anxieties over where the future of agriculture goes and address those in a way that makes sense for our shareholders, the taxpayers of the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. Script here. The chair would remind members they'll be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in the order of arrival, and I appreciate everyone's understanding in that regard. With that, I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Secretary, again, thanks for being here, and we're looking forward to working with you across this myriad of issues that we have going forward. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I represent a lot of cotton farmers. I believe we had a very elegant fix to the issue with respect to cotton and the stacks program that didn't work. It should have been in the omnibus bill, but our colleagues, particularly two of them in the Senate, refused to see the wisdom of that, and for their own purposes and own benefit, didn't let that happen. So now we're left with the same wreck in cotton. I hope I can count on working with you across whatever tools that we have. Obviously, we think that cottonseed could go under the Title I program. There could be a lot of challenges with making that happen, and look forward to working with you either on that or other issues with respect to getting some help to offset what China and India has done to the market that doesn't allow our producers to compete properly. I'd like to turn now to the Trade Undersecretary that you've done. Obviously, authorized in the 14 Farm Bill. Thank you very much for seeing the wisdom of that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you see your undersecretary working with the other array of trade entities, whether it's the USTR, Commerce Department, whoever that might be, and the role that undersecretary would play, not only in making sure the negotiations go the correct way, but also making sure that the administration keeps a close look on enforcement of the various trade things that we have out there. So could you walk us through your vision in that?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Mr. Chairman, and before I get into the answer to that question, you know that you and I have had conversations. I was very pleased that the National Cotton Council came up with a very innovative and creative budget-neutral idea over their program, and it's very disappointing that we were not able to get that done, but we can look at the resolution in the 18 Farm Bill as you indicated. Certainly, as I went around visiting, I visited with really 75 of your members on the other side of the House, and I think trade was on all of their minds, really, because we're fortunate to live in a nation where we can grow more than we can consume, and that's the essence of trade, doing what we do well. And also, it's also a noble endeavor to feed the world. Our new motto for USDA is do right and feed everyone, and that's what we want to do. We want to feed the hungry here in the United States, but we want to feed the hungry around the world, and our producers and ranchers have demonstrated a capacity to share and to do that. That's what trade's all about. I think in the 14 Farm Bill, you all recognize that and suggested very strongly in a Undersecretary for Trade. I happen to agree with you. Was not an easy thing to do. There were several components that had to come together, and we're working through those details right now. But we felt it was important because trade was almost number one on everyone's mind that I spoke with, internally, externally, in the Senate, and for those of you who commented as well. We've got to sell our way out of this supply-demand situation that are depressing prices in the U.S. now, and that's what we hope to do. You've seen we've seen some early successes of that, and we'll continue. The fact is, my opinion is that people do business with people, and I wanted someone every day that woke up with that on their mind. Where can I go to sell United States agricultural products around the world? Who's hungry? Who will buy? How can we do the deal? Now, our role at USDA is to provide the expertise, the content, and to the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Ross, and to our new trade representative, Mr. Lighthouser, in order to be a triumvirate of sales. The Secretary of Commerce has a broader portfolio than we do at USDA, but that's the blending of trade. You do what you do well, and we sell you what we do well. So I've been very impressed with Secretary Ross and his really sinking his teeth into ag issues and ag products there, and we're very pleased with the progress we've made so far. So we believe the Secretary of Trade will be on everyone's front door as often as can be. This guy's going to be a million-mile flyer around the world to be there in person, because we know that foreign interests love to see you in person. It's an honor for them, for us to come to their doorstep and call on them and say, here's my card, we want to do the deal. And that's important. We can do conference calls, we can do videos, but the presence is important. That person could not do that when they were also charged with the Farm Service Agency of having all these multiple offices around the country dealing with those customer-facing issues every day. So I felt very strongly that the segregation of that, having a Undersecretary for Trade, was vitally important to get the job done of selling these bountiful products.
Well, again, thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I look forward to working with you. That, I recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Secretary, I want to let you know, I think you know this, that I very strongly support the chairman and the cotton industry and finding a fix for them. And so whatever you can do to help, I will be there to help as well. The rural development issue has caused some consternation here and there, but I take you at your word that you're going to continue to make that a priority. And I think you're the secretary. You decide how the department should be run. And the only thing I'd say is we're going to watch to make sure that rural development gets the same kind of emphasis that it always has. And you've said that, and I expect that'll happen. And another issue that I hope you and Secretary Ross, and I think you will, keep the Mexicans' feet to the fire on the sugar issue and try to get that resolved. So far, you've been doing a great job with that. One of the things that I went through here recently, we had a high path outbreak in my district, and the department did a great job responding to it, and the state and everybody. So I've had firsthand look at this, and it's clear that the time to start a conversation with our trade partners regarding the use of vaccines to minimize the impacts with IPATH doesn't need to happen during the course of the outbreak. You know, that it seems like it's what we do, but I think it needs to happen at a different time. So, you know, that's when the trade impacts are the most damaging. So do you think that because of the trade impacts associated with a decision like the use of vaccines to eradicate a disease, such as a stamp-out procedure, should begin now rather than when we get into the next?
I think it's wise. Obviously, sometimes I guess the saying we'd have in Georgia, when the mules are out the gate, it's too long to close. It's too late to close the gate. So you don't get that opportunity after an outbreak has occurred. So I think you all are wise in considering a vaccine bank, whether it's foot and mouth disease, whether it's high-path avian influenza. I will comment the fact that while the 2015 outbreak of high-path, we were a little slow to respond, both at the state and probably the federal level. The outbreak that we've had in Tennessee and North Alabama this year, I was very, very impressed with the process there, the biosanitary processes and protocols that our producers have learned, the depopulation and the speed with which USDA moved over the indemnification issues, and there was no confusion there. So to their credit, that was confined very, very tightly, and that's the best kind of insurance we can have, although I think this committee and Congress is very wise to consider a foot and mouth disease bank. It may be high-path avian as well, because of the damage to the market psychologically. You know what happens whenever we have any of these outbreaks. You go back to BSE almost 15 years ago or longer. That's how long it's taken us to get beef back into some nations there. So it damages the market, not just for that period of time, but it gives people a loss of confidence in our reputation of safety in the U.S. So we know that vaccination is effective, and I think you're wise to consider those efforts.
You know, thank you, and I think you're right that the people have learned a lot, and we are much better prepared to deal with this. But would a companion program for animal health mirroring the plant pest and disease program administered by APHIS be helpful, in your opinion, in managing these disease threats?
Certainly, I think from a food safety perspective, from an animal plant health inspection, I think the USDA and those sub-agencies are probably second to none in the world, and that's why the USDA stamp is so valuable and revered around the world. People trust it, and we want to continue to maintain those high standards in those areas.
So I believe that you've tasked the Farm Service Agency with looking at a revamp of the CRP program. Did you give them any specific direction, or are you just having them look at where things are at?
Well, Congressman, I'm just beginning today my 4th week on the job, and while we have waiting for some of the other people to get into that, as you know, on the realignment, we're talking about FSA and NRCS and RMA being co-located and speaking with one voice and one database, frankly. But I think, again, the opportunity to deal with those kind of issues we've not specifically dealt with. I know a topic of interest or concern to you is CRP. I look forward to visiting with you again. I've not given specific directions. My comments about that is I think we can have some flexibility in the CRP program, maybe take out some of the least productive areas and use them rather than whole field type of philosophy we've had with CRP. Give a little more flexibility in that way. You know, with the wildfires, we gave some flexibility regarding grazing on some of these areas as well. So we want to be flexible while we maintain the integrity of the program and help to train through FSA and NRCS our farmers to utilize their least productive acres, those that cost the most, and they may even have a better, higher net income if we don't try to plant wall to wall.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time's up. Ms. Lucas, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, Mr. Secretary, it is indeed good to see you. And you mentioned a moment ago on some of the burning issues. Let's talk about that for a moment. I think most of my colleagues are aware that in the early part of March this year, a series of wildfires burned over 1.5 million acres of land in western Oklahoma, western Kansas, and the Texas Panhandle. And these fires killed thousands of head of cattle, destroyed hundreds and hundreds of miles of fence, impacted countless families, businesses, and it's hard to estimate the impact on the little communities. On the 4th of April, 2017, USDA authorized emergency grazing on Conservation Reserve Program lands located in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas for 90 days. The flexibility to graze on CRP was and is critical to the survival of many operations throughout my district. And that being said, it will take longer than 90 days to regrow the forage, rebuild the facilities needed to maintain, contain, and care for the surviving livestock. And last week, I, along with Representative Marshall on this committee and Representative Thornberry, sent you a letter requesting extension of the emergency grazing authorization past the current 90-day authorization. Would this extension be something that you would be willing to consider, Mr. Secretary?
Absolutely. I think it's a reasonable request. As you know, I didn't get to the burned areas, but my first trip outside was Kansas City. I heard directly from many of those affected about that. And I think it's a reasonable request, certainly one that we'd consider very seriously in a reasonable request effort, because we know that grass doesn't just necessarily grow right back on those kind of issues.
Absolutely, Mr. Secretary. And I've lived all my life in northwest Oklahoma, but I have never seen anything of the magnitude of these fires. Drive for 20 miles and see not one living creature. Yeah. Just the most amazing thing. So the potential for that extension would have a tremendous impact, I think, upon my constituents. To touch on one other point that my colleagues have talked about already, in concept, the NRCS, the FSA, and the RMA coordination would could improve by being under single mission area of farm production and conservation. And I'm particularly sensitive about these issues because my district was ground zero in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. And part of why in the drought of the 1950s and the drought we went through in the early part of this decade, things were so dramatically different were all of those conservation efforts properly practiced out there, encouraged by the NRCS and their predecessors, the Soil Conservation Service. How will you ensure that that conservation mission will not be diminished in a way under this new management program, and that the voluntary incentive-based conservation, which is the way we practiced it since the 1930s, will continue to be the highest priority of the department?
It's a good question. Mission is no change at all. Personnel, no change. All we're doing is trying to bring the family together where we can communicate better to serving that same customer, whether they're signing up for a farm program, an ARC, PLC, or EQIP or other things there to come in. I view it as an economy of scale issue. If you've got NRCS in one area and you've got FSA and they got 2 people in the office and one of them out, our customers are suffering. If you've got 4 people there, that's a little bit better economy of scale to serve people. We're really talking about the same customers. Now, from a family perspective, how do we communicate? How do we, when farmers and ranchers walk into those offices, I want to say, you know, whoever greets them, how can we help you today? That's not my job. And that's the purpose of the realignment. We'll learn better to communicate. We'll learn better the real needs of the farm rancher customer that walks in the door, helping to do a farm plan for them. If they're signing up for one thing and we're right there, then we can say, well, let's do an NRCS waterway program that way and help them be more aware of all the things that NRCS can do. I agree with you. The technology of better water, cleaner water, we're making great strides in. Our farm community is really understanding their stewardship authority or really opportunity better than they've ever had. They now understand they're responsible for that offlow off their farms, and they want to do things. NRCS is critical in enabling them, teaching them, educating them how to do that. So no change in mission. We're realigning, I think, in a closer family atmosphere where we can have a critical mass to help people better.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yield back, Mr.
General time expired. Mr. Scott.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, all of Georgia is very proud of you. And this nation will soon find out why. You are a wonderful, wonderful person, and we're delighted to have you as our Secretary of Agriculture. Mr. Secretary, we're faced with a very serious national crisis. And that national crisis is the expanding age of our farmers. The average age of our farmers is right at 60 years of age. And we in this committee have put together a bill to address that. It is House Resolution 51. Let me just tell you, we've been on this mission for over 2 years. It gives us an opportunity to utilize the 1890s African American institutions land grant, which you're familiar with. Fort Valley is the case in Georgia, and you know the whole history of that. We were able to make sure that we had these land grants. So where you have a University of Florida, you have Florida A&M and Prairie View in Texas and so forth. The presidents of these universities have come before this committee and addressed this need. So we have this bill. It's House Resolution 51. What it does is this. It will allow us to utilize these 1890s to address this issue and get our younger generation into farming, into agriculture. And more than that, agriculture is now, farming is far beyond the mule and the plow from past. Agriculture is a very sophisticated, technology-driven, science-driven engineering. These African American institutions have curriculum applied to address what we refer to as STEM, science, technology, education, and math at these. And so what we want to do with this bill is to change some language in the Farm Bill, which would, one, right now, these universities can only spend the money that we give them in education, research, and extension. But we want to change and add a fourth area that they could spend it in, which would be student scholarships. We've also set aside, and we're working with, the CCC, which is the Commodities Credit Corporation, to make sure we have the efficient funds available. We're offering $1 million for each of the 5 years for each of the 19 schools. That comes to $95 million. It is something that these universities, who've been there in the fire and have helped to find young people a way out of no way, and we have not exactly been efficient in applying funding, but this would be the area to do it. I want you to know that this is a bipartisan bill. We have, like Kevin Kramer from North Dakota is a sponsor on the Republican side. Myself, several on this committee, Ms. Fudge, Mr. Lawson, Ms. Adams, another Republican, Ms. Mia Love out of Utah. So what I want to ask of you, and I know you've been on 4 weeks, we want to make sure we sent the bill to your staff, and certainly we want you to really get familiar with it and help us get this bill through our committee here, where it is now, onto the floor, and to the Senate, and to the White House. We've been in touch with the White House. We're working with the senior legislative director there, Mark Shart. Mark is very familiar with it. In our Blue Dog Democratic meeting, he and I talked about it. And President Trump is interested in this type of effort. And of course, when you read it, if they haven't already informed you, the administration of this particular bill will be through the Department of Agriculture. So we appreciate you. We can't get it done without your help here. And so I want to ask you for your support and to work with the committee and help us get this through the House, through the Senate, and over to President Trump.
Congressman Scott, you've identified some real challenges. You talked about the age issue, but you know those are particularly significant and disadvantaged opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I'm very, very familiar with Fort Valley State University, having grown up in the county next door and the beneficiary of one of their honorary doctorates as well. So we understand the power of these land-grant universities here across the country because our extension service is directly responsible, I think, for the productive capacity of that. So I think if we can use some scholarship dollars to bring these young people in who have a desire. Many times they haven't had the advantage of growing up on a farm. We're seeing this in 4-H and FFA, but young people understand all the science, the technology, the big business. The problem is the high capital barrier to enter agriculture.
Right.
But if we can train more people with a passion for agriculture in these institutions, and I think you've heard the President affirm his commitment to that with funding, I would welcome the opportunity to utilize those kind of funds across the HBUC community in those land grant facilities where we can use that for the betterment of agriculture. So I applaud you. I hate to tell you, your colleague, Mr. Bishop, has already beat you to the punch on that. He's got me the copy of it. So
Wonderful.
I'm familiar with it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Gibbs, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations, Mr. Secretary, and thank you also for the willingness to take on this endeavor. It's not an easy task, and I want to thank you for doing that. I see in your bio, I'm from Ohio. You did spend a little time in Ohio as a veterinarian during the Vietnam conflict, and so you got a little taste of the Buckeye State, and I think you were just there in southern Ohio recently.
I did. We were in Cincinnati just recently and southern Ohio, but I was just south of Columbus at the Air Force Base there, and got familiar with a lot of your farmers out the south gate of that base, and they had some pretty nice pheasants at that time. I hope they're coming back.
I hope so, too. You might not remember, but about 3 years ago, I was asked to make some remarks at, I think it was the National Farmer Co-op Council in Hilton Head, and I remember this. After I made my remarks, you came up and introduced yourself, and we had a nice little chat, and that's my only interaction so far I've had with you, and it was a good memory, so I appreciate that. A couple of things. I want to also thank you for reevaluating the school lunch program, bring some common sense to that. And I wish somebody, and maybe it be you, not only talk about the nutrition aspects, but let's talk about exercise and activity. You know, kids, school-age kids can burn a lot of calories, and I don't think we're getting the activity of exercise and the like we used to when we were kids. And you know, I think it's good that we're putting. I guess we only have 2% milk. It's 1% of skim milk in the schools, and just some common sense and reasonableness. And I know my dairy producers will appreciate that. In Ohio, we're a big dairy state. Also, I want to thank you too for your on WOTUS, on the regulatory side, Waters United States, some common sense in there, and working with Administrator Pruitt, the EPA, to go back to the states and work out a rule that addresses the Supreme Court decisions. Also, I want to ask a question, first of all, on the crop insurance. Do you have any thoughts how we can make crop insurance better and make it a more essential part of the safety net program? Because as a policymaker, when I talk to non-farming public, it is when you talk crop insurance, the non-farming public can understand that better. And I would argue in a 10-year budget window, it probably isn't that much cost to the taxpayers, you know, but it really helps in the years when we have a disaster like a widespread drought. But on the revenue side and the weather side, can you maybe give us your thoughts of what we could do to make crop insurance even better? And I think it would work for the PR's aspect.
I'd be happy to, Congressman. I think, again, what we see, I agree with you that I think an insurance program for our producers is a much more palatable safety net program from the public shareholder perspective than direct payments were. I thought you all made a lot of progress in 2014 and transitioning to that area of ARC, PLC, backed up with crop insurance, which puts some responsibility on the producers themselves. Now, that insurance program is not perfect. We've got some things we need to readjust. There's on cotton, for instance, the chairman's interested in, we've got a quality issue that the quality degradation is not right. We hope to adjust that. The other thing that sometimes for your producers may have if they're on ARC, may have a county payment in one county or might farm in both counties, and it's different. And they don't quite understand those differences either as well. So there's some fine tuning. Overall, I think the insurance program has been a great addition. We need to look at more specialty crops, how we can cover more specialty crops in that area and more. We don't want to create a program where our producers are farming for the program. And that happened in the past. Yep. And that creates some unnatural market forces that we don't want to have happen. So we want a true safety net for those who are doing right, and we don't want people farming for insurance payments either. We want them legitimately, but the insurance ought to be utilized when there is a true revenue loss to that producer, be it be price or be it be production, and how can we design that program? So I think you all had a great start, and we'll look forward to working with you all as we go through the 14 Farm Bill to make sure that the RMA program is even more effective going forward. We know that the Stacks program was not as helpful to the cotton producers as you all would have hoped, and the dairy program certainly on some of those issues.
Yeah, well, I'm really concerned about the dairy, and then I didn't run out of time here, but hopefully we have time to questions on trade, and especially Asia and NAFTA. So
Sure.
I have to yield back now.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. Costa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, welcome, Mr. Secretary, and we look forward to working with you. And you, like myself and many of us here, reflect generations of farm families, and we obviously welcome you to this important effort as we look at reauthorizing the Farm Bill. I don't want to repeat what has been discussed already on farm credit, crop insurance, cotton, and dairy, but I'd like to focus on some California issues specifically. As the #1 agricultural state and the diversity and the breadth and the width, we take great pride in the production in California, and I know you're aware of it. My California colleagues and I here on the dais would like to invite you sooner than later to come out to California, where we could have a conversation with our farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women, and talk about the complexity of California agriculture. Speaking of which, we worked very hard in the last Farm Bill to provide the opportunity for the California dairy industry to participate in the federal marketing order. We are now have completed the process of the due diligence. USDA is moving on this milk order. I'd like to get your thoughts on the current timeline, and can we tackle this final rule before the end of 2017? And as you know, the quota issue, if you haven't been briefed on it, is a key part of whether or not the dairy producers will provide a 2/3 vote to join the federal marketing order.
Certainly, Congressman. I'd be happy to answer as best I can. I will admit to you that even when we were in the dairy business, I'm not sure I ever understood the marketing orders, but I hope to understand it better going forward. Back to your original question about the diversity of comments about diversity of agriculture in California. I had the pleasure this past week of meeting with about 30 of your western growers there that comprise California, Arizona, a little bit of Nevada there.
It says you did a good job.
And we talked about that. I think they were thrilled to know that while I grew up on a diversified row crop farm, my father's first love was truck farming, melons and beans and sweet corn and those kind of things. So we kind of got down in a brotherhood bond there with those guys. But the milk order for you've got a very significant dairy industry in California, and the marketing order is important for stability and predictability in the milk prices. As I understand it, we just completed the first step in that on the 15th of May here, releasing that, and I will commit to you that we will complete that marketing order by the end of the year.
All right, let me move on because time is, we don't get a lot of time here. Obviously, a conversation to be continued. Trade obviously is very important. I was disappointed when the president withdrew from all the work that had been done on the TPP. Nonetheless, there were a lot of elements in there that applied to both Mexico and Canada. And I want to applaud your efforts to taking that map. I'd like to see that map that you took to the president and talked about the importance of our trading partners both in Mexico and Canada. Do you believe that some of the elements that were contained in the TPP can be the basis of moving forward as Secretary Ross and yourself and the trade ambassador do what the president has requested, and that is to renegotiate NAFTA?
Absolutely. I think, again, many of the principles that were included in that, and actually in tandem with the renegotiation of NAFTA. You might could see a sort of a trilateral TPP. I'm just suggesting that, but many of the principles that you all had in that negotiations, I think are still viable. It's just a matter of fine-tuning those in a way that makes sense. That I don't think this administration is not against free trade at all. It really is more concerned of fair trade.
Well, and to that point, it works both ways. I mean, we in 2010 dealt with the Mexican trucking issue, and last year with the country of origin labeling. If we play that game, they can play that game with reciprocity, and then I think it becomes a real problem, and I think we need to understand that. We stand ready to work with you on that. And then finally, agricultural labor is a big issue, and I know the Western growers brought that to your attention. It is something we're going to have to continue to fix a broken immigration system in this country, and we would look forward to your support and efforts along those lines.
Absolutely. Again, I want to define my definition of fair trade. You don't have trade unless it's fair for all those involved. Right. And we understand that. That's the essence of trade, actually. And they got some pretty good negotiators on the other side as well. So I don't think you have to be too concerned about us taking advantage of anyone.
No, it's just a two-way street. That's
right. On the labor issue, it was trade, labor, and regulation, as I heard over and over again. And I think critically important is agricultural labor. I've had an opportunity to converse with the president on that. He understands the contribution that many immigrants are making to the ag economy, and we're going to help to provide a way forward for our producers in that area.
Thank you.
Gentleman, time expired. Mr. King, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, I very much appreciate you being here.
Yes.
I want to start out with a retraction of a statement that I made when I first heard of your name coming forward as Secretary of Agriculture. And I will say I thought it was candidly, but I said, I hope it's more than about peaches and peanuts. And you came to Iowa 11 days after confirmation, and it was absolutely clear it's much, much more than about peaches and peanuts. And I was gratified to hear many of the things that you had to say there in the heart of my district. And I just wrote down a few of them here from memory. I think there will be a lot of colloquialisms that will come from our new Secretary of Agriculture, and it adds a lot of flavor to our rural life. For example, I'm speaking of the trade, that you grow it, we'll sell it. I like that bumper sticker, and I have every confidence that'll be the policy coming out of the USDA. And one of the other things you said is, an oath is stronger even than a contract. That stuck in my mind as a deep piece of wisdom that a lot of us can apply to our job here every single day. And let's see, the equipment might be a little different, but the people are the same. That's another thing that I think is true all across this country, and it's something we can keep in mind here in this Ag Committee. And I'll leave out the full story about the cow's tail, but that made it all real, Mr. Secretary. So I wanted to welcome you to this Ag Committee, and I look forward to many discussions that we'll have in the future years, and I think they will be very productive. One of the things on my mind, though, as far as an issue is concerned, is the fear of foot and mouth disease. And it's some of the things that we've been working on for, I'd say, a year and a half or 2 years now in my district and beyond. That's the worst calamity we can imagine as far as a biosecurity situation is concerned. And I know that been doing some work there through Iowa State, and their request that I see across the industry is for a vaccine bank that starts out at about $150 million and then rotates, sells off some of that vaccine and keeps always a fresh supply there. We've got another way to go where I think we can genetically design a vaccine that is going to be cheaper and can be reproduced more quickly. So you went up the road to APHIS, and I wasn't able to tag along on that stop. But I wondered if you had any fresh thoughts on FMD and what you might be able to tell this committee on how you'd approach our preparations for a potential calamity.
Well, as a veterinarian, I obviously understand the benefit of vaccination and the fact that we cannot psychologically afford even a foot and mouth disease scare here at all. We saw what BSE did to us, and we've talked about that earlier, but I want to compliment you on how well you listened in Iowa. I was delighted to be in your district and to move up from the Cowser Farm, a very innovative farm operation, family farm operation there, up to the Ames facility, the APHIS Ames facility. I was very impressed. We talked specifically about vaccine banks there. You know, they're a repository along with Iowa State of a USDA facility responsible for vaccination protocols as well. So I'm hoping that we can I look at vaccine banks as insurance, and you can't have your house burned down and take out insurance after the fact and it pay off. You got to have vaccines, and you got to have a vaccine availability ahead of the time. So I look at it as a wise insurance program.
And I know there have been some estimates out there on what kind of a cost it might be if we have an outbreak of FMD. But do you have a sense of that? And I don't want to hold you to that on oath because there's things that are kind of amorphous, but could you give us a sense of the scope that your perception is?
I don't have any numbers right there, but I would use kind of the commercial. I think it would be the antithesis of priceless.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Let me shift subjects just a little bit. And there's been a little discussion here on crop insurance. And I want the record to show that I absolutely support crop insurance. It's the essential component for risk management. And if we don't have crop insurance, we'd lose perhaps generations, especially young farmers. And so it's essential to keep our family farms on the farm, the ones we have left. I just ask the question this way. Would it be your belief that the unsubsidized premium for crop insurance should reflect the risk?
I think, again, any valid insurance program, whether it's crop insurance or any other insurance program, has to reflect the reality of risk there. That's what insurance is all about. As I said, as we continue to perfect the insurance program, because I agree with you, and as you well know, credit in these economic times is getting more tight. Lenders are requiring an insurance product, maybe forward contracting as well, so that the producers can demonstrate repayment ability. And as we go through there, yes, I agree that it ought to be commensurate with risk. That's a tough issue. How do we do that individually or by county or by region in a way to do that? That's why reporting is so important for our farmers. The census is so important for our farmers and producers to make sure we have accurate data that we can make good, wise actuarial decisions on.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Jim's time has expired. Ms. Fudge, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, it was really good to hear you talk about feeding the world. That's very different from the President's budget, which is cut almost every single feeding program or zeroed them out. So I'm hopeful that you will win. I am as well concerned as my ranking member about rural development. It's indicated in the reorganization plan that there would no longer be an undersecretary. It was going to be elevated in some way. I'm not sure how that is, except because the undersecretary reports to you now. So I'm not sure what that change is really going to be. But I am concerned, and certainly we will see how it goes as we move forward, because I tell you, you've been really busy in 4 short weeks. This is a major reorganization. So I'm just going to be watching, as is the rest of the committee, to see how we progress with that. Mr. Lucas raised the issue of NRCS, which I'm also concerned about. And my first question to you is, should we, in the future, look forward to seeing any kind of mergers within the agency or plans to close any of our NRCS offices? And my second question is, relates to the Office of Advocacy and Outreach, which Congress put in place so that there would be an advocate on behalf of small, beginning, and minority farmers. Last year, the USDA elevated that office to report directly to the Secretary, to you, sir. Your proposed plan now drops it back down to reporting to the Assistant Secretary for Departmental Administration. I just want to know what your thinking was on that.
Okay. Those are 3 important issues. I'll be happy to address all of them if you don't mind. I think, again, from an RD perspective, I welcome the accountability. I'm an outcome kind of guy. As I understand the current organizational chart, the undersecretaries report to the deputy secretary. And I view the RD portion of this, particularly in limited resources, possibly with a infrastructure program from the administration and from you all. I'm not a micromanager, but I'm a hands-on manager. And this is an area that I think Secretary Vilsack and I had wonderful conversations about how the potential of USDA has been used across the country in rural communities, both in water systems, both in utilities, and both in community facilities. This is something I guess I jealously wanted to be a part of. And when I say elevated, I mean elevated to a portion where that person's going to be sitting close to me with walk-in privileges over, this is a great opportunity, this is the deal, what do you think about it, how can we do better to do that? So I welcome your oversight in the RD proportion. The mission is not going to diminish whatsoever. The distribution network that's been developed out here with great people all over the country is not going to be diminished at all. The people in RD are going to report to this assistant secretary who will have direct access to the secretary, and I consider that an elevation. You might can think about it in nomenclature, but there was no way of diminishment. If you gave me the opportunity in a corporation to have direct access to the CEO on walk-in privileges over ideas versus a title of a VP, give me that direct access anytime. That's the influence, that's the power, is access. So that's the way I view the RD, and I look forward to your accountability in that. NRCS, mission's not going to change, people aren't going to change. Maybe some locations might change from an economy of scale perspective, as I explained earlier. If we've got disparate people in maybe 2 per office in different places, and we can combine there to have an economy of scale that makes a difference of service to our customers, we may consider doing that. There's no, in fact, I think there's actually some preclusions about closing any places. So we're looking if there's any combination of bringing the family into one house rather than being scattered out in a compound, and we look to have better service in that way. Thirdly, the advocacy, and there's a strong there. Secretary Vilsack had made a lot of progress in that. I don't see that diminishing whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The lady yields back. Mr. Scott, Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, Mr. Secretary, Mary's husband.
All great titles.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you'd be mending fence or checking cows right now if she hadn't agreed to marry you. Probably wouldn't be here. Great man, great family, and what you'll find from Sonny Perdue is if he can help you, he will help you, and if he tells you he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And I've always appreciated that from you. And Governor, just a couple of quick comments and questions, maybe. I was at the USDA research station in Byron this last week. As you know, research is not something that you can simply cut on and off. It's a long-term commitment, it's a long-term investment, and that investment has to be coupled with extension for it to actually get to the fields and help the farmers and our economy. And so they brought up while I was there the hiring freeze, and certainly hope that as we go forward, we're able to come out from underneath that hiring freeze, and that you have the flexibility to put the people in the most effective areas with regard to research, and that that partnership will be there with the states, I know, under you for the extension to actually get that research to the field. Your commitment to 4-H, your commitment to FFA is something that also I think those two organizations are extremely important to rural America, and I know that those organizations will benefit from you being in that position as well. One of the things that has changed on the farm in the last couple of years, and is changing at an exponential rate, is the use of technology. We know that President Trump will have an infrastructure program that will be put forward. The rural broadband, as you know, we need that, quite honestly, more than we need roads and bridges in many of the counties that I represent. You know, from growing up in Houston County, you've got metropolitan areas, and then just a few miles down the road, you have areas like you grew up in Bon Air, and I lived in Ashburn for a long time. I tell people I live in Tifton now, but I actually live in Chula, Georgia. And so if you could just speak to the rural broadband issue and any assistance that you believe that the USDA can give us with making sure that the rural broadband is a part of President Trump's infrastructure package, I would appreciate your comments on that.
Be happy to, friend. First of all, let me talk about research just a second, because you mentioned that, and you're absolutely right. The reason our producers are so productive today in the 21st century is because of the research and the foundation that's been laid. It's not something that can be cut off and on. And the other thing is the delivery system of that basic and applied research to the field through the Extension Service has been sort of the wonder of the world, and we see what difference it's made in our productivity, and will continue to need to be as we have to feed 9 billion people by 2050. So that's important, but you made a great point. Another thing that's just as important is the technology, because you know your producers in Middle and South Georgia are using technology for better water usage, better technology for precision agriculture, for monitoring crop needs, whether it's whatever adding, and the telemetry that's needed out there is dependent on wireless technology and Wi-Fi. And while the other thing sociologically, Congressman, in today's world of connectivity, it might be true in your house with Wells age. If the water goes off, that's kind of a disadvantage. If your lights go off, oh, bummer. If your heat goes off, you'll get a blanket. But if your Wi-Fi goes off, that's a crisis. And that's kind of what happens out there in the world today is we're not going, sociologically, to David's point, to Congressman Scott's point, we're not going to keep these young people on the farm attracted there if they don't have the connectivity they're used to when they go to college. They're not going to come back. And it's vitally important. The good news is this is square on the radar scope of the president as well as the FCC chairman. I've had conversations with him. He is anxiously awaiting the infrastructure plan where we can ambitiously take rural broadband ubiquitously across the country. As you know, there are places in our home state you can't even get a cell signal, and other places. So we've got a lot of challenges, but I'm convinced of what you hit on. It's the modern day road, sewer, water of the 21st century is connectivity, and I look forward to promulgating as much of that as we can across the country.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you. And Wells is most upset right now that it's not duck season, turkey season, and National Marine Fisheries Services just took the snapper season away from him and only gave him 3 days. So any help with that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. McGovern, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. And I appreciated reading that your new motto at USDA is, and I quote, "Let's do right and feed everyone." I think we all hopefully share that goal. And I was a little surprised in your opening statement and in your written testimony, I didn't see any mention of SNAP, which is the premier anti-hunger program in this country. We have 42 million Americans who are food insecure, who are hungry. Many of them rely on this program to be able to put food on their table for themselves and their kids. And it's one of the most efficiently run federal programs we have. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the men and women who work at USDA who oversee and implement this program, because it has one of the lowest error rates and fraud rates of any federal program we have. We might want to consider lending some of those staff to the Department of Defense to oversee their defense contracting. They might get it better over there, but the bottom line is it's a good program. And I worry because there's lots of talk. I've got a bunch of articles that appeared in the last couple of weeks of members of this body and some people in the administration looking at SNAP as a place to basically try to find money to pay for other priorities, essentially using it as an ATM machine. And I think that would be a mistake. We've heard talk of block granting SNAP. We've heard talk of putting more restrictions on the program, putting more hurdles in place to make it more difficult for people to be eligible for the program, which I think would be a mistake. The average amount of time that people are on this program is less than a year. And the benefit, I would argue, is inadequate. It's about, on average, about $1.40 per person per meal, which is, you can't buy a coffee for that nowadays. So I guess my question to you is, I'm looking for some assurance here that, one, you're a strong defender of the program, that you're not advocating structural changes or trying to put more hurdles in place to make it more difficult for poor people to get food, because it's a concern of a lot of people in this country, and so I'd be interested in hearing your views on what you plan for SNAP.
Thank you, Congressman. I did not include that because I was hoping you would ask me the question. I thought you would. But nonetheless, I agree with all that you said. It's been a very important, effective program. I'm a continuing improvement guy. Can we improve maybe the delivery and the processes and the protocols there? Yes, we've got some disparity between our states of how they're implementing and executing that and the cost over delivery, and I'd like to see more unanimity in some of those delivery mechanisms, learning from the best, learning from one another about how we can deliver those programs even better. But as far as I'm concerned, we have no proposed changes. You don't try to fix things that aren't broken. And when the motto is do right and feed everyone, I view that as very, very inclusive.
Well, I find that reassuring. Just one other point. There's been a lot of focus on this group of people called able-bodied adults without dependents, and some have suggested that we be tougher on that population, because, as you know, the rules are that if you're on the program and you're not working or you're on a job training program, in 3 months you lose the benefit and you're not eligible to get it back for another 3 years. Bottom line is a lot of those able-bodied adults without dependents are veterans who have returned from serving our country halfway around the world. And while it may sound nice to kind of go after that population, the bottom line is it's a complicated population. One other thing, Ms. Fudge mentioned the issue of our commitment overseas. Again, acknowledging that you were not here when the President drafted his budget, I am worried that programs like the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education program, which has fed millions of kids around the world in school settings, the most vulnerable children in the world, it has been a tremendous success. I've visited these programs. It's zeroed out in the President's budget. I worry about the future of Food for Peace. So I'm hoping that you'll be a strong advocate to put the money back in for those programs, because I do think they represent the best of our country, and I think they contribute greatly to our national security.
I can't disagree with you again, Congressman, and I think, again, from the perspective of veterans, I'll be in South Dakota this Friday on a Vets for Ag program as we help to transition them into those jobs, because, as you well know, the Supplemental Nutrition Program was a time-limited program in a tough time for a period to help them get a job. And so we want to be part of the growing the economy, of help restoring these veterans to to a livelihood that, and frankly, we need them in agriculture. So that's the heartbeat of USDA regarding veterans in there. We also support states' waiver ability for veterans in that as well on those kind of restrictions.
Well, and I hope maybe beyond veterans too, because not just veterans, but sometimes there are vulnerable populations in addition to that. But and McGovern Dole and Food for Peace as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jim's time expired. Mr. Crawford, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you. Good to see you again. Just been a couple of weeks that we toured some of the devastation in my district. Let me thank you for your responsiveness, your department's responsiveness, and your personal attention on that issue. I think our 100-year floods are coming a little more frequently than every 100 years. This is our third in 6 years, so you saw that yourself. And I guess as I mentioned before, and has been talked about here, crop insurance is an important component, no question about it. But as it applies to rice, the practical to replant provision there, I think, has really added more confusion than clarity. And so I'm hoping that you can, and I'm certain that you will, it should work with us on actually trying to provide some flexibility on that, because as you know, after May 15th, it's strictly not practical to replant rice and expect a yield. So having some alternative would be much appreciated.
Congressman, I agree with you. You know that those contracts are set, and it can't be changed for this incident, this tragedy that just happened. But the RMA has learned from that, and certainly on some of these dates on practical replant makes a huge difference regarding yield, production, the quality of seed, the hybrid seed, and other things of the chemicals that are linked with that. So I think you'll see, and I will commit to you that you'll see some changes in the RMA practical dates going forward for the 18 contract.
Appreciate that. I also want to thank you for your comments during your confirmation hearing with regard to Cuba. I think that's very important, as we've had a chance to visit about that. The value proposition that presents for U.S. farmers and ranchers, and I know at this point the White House is right now undergoing a Cuba policy review and considering whether or not to reverse course on our recent expansion of relations with Cuba. I hope that you'll be a vocal advocate on that score, so that when they do develop that policy, that it would be inclusive on the ag front.
Well, certainly the financial policy that you all have faced is beyond my pay grade, but I think someone said it earlier, if our folks grow it, I want to sell it, and they eat in Cuba as well.
Absolutely. On that note, H.R. 525 is something we've been working on for a while now. The Cuba Ag Exports Act actually removes the financial restrictions that you mentioned. Right now, we can sell ag products in Cuba, but it's a cash up front requirement that is really an impediment to fully realizing the potential of that market for U.S. producers. Many of the members on this committee are co-sponsors of that legislation, including the chairman and the ranking member. And I hope that you'd be able to review that and endorse that bill, because we want to try and move that forward as quickly as we can, provide greater market access.
As I said, I think that's something I would be supportive of if folks around the world need private credit to buy our products, and I'm all for that. I probably would have some personal concern if we were doing public credit to the nation
Absolutely.
of Cuba.
I share that sentiment, and that's the bill's written to address that very provision, that is strictly a private transaction with no taxpayer backstop, and I think that's important to note. So go back to cotton real quick. I just wanted to echo the concerns of the chairman in regards to the problems that we're facing in cotton country, and we're behind you by one. We're number 3 in cotton, and Georgia's number 2, and chairman will claim credit for Texas being number 1 in cotton production. But we're all in this together, and cotton producers need relief, and they need it yesterday. And you know, when we start to lose our gin infrastructure, as the old saying goes, you can cut down an oak tree in 5 minutes, but it takes a long time to grow it back. And so as we start to see our ginning infrastructure disappear, it's going to have an impact on our rural economies, and I think in the broader sense on our economy in the state and in general. So I hope that, as you've indicated, and I'm sure you will, use every tool at your disposal to help us address that issue of the cotton producers belt-wide.
Thank you, sir. I hadn't told the chairman yet, but I think our chief economist just said Georgia was #1 in cotton. But
Is that right?
Depends on which year.
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Secretary, and we certainly look forward to working with you, and I congratulate you, and you know, you certainly are the right guy at the right time, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time expired. Ms. Bustos, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Perdue, thank you for joining us today. I look forward to working with you as I represent the northwestern part of the state of Illinois. I want to start with a quick question, I hope, and then go into something a little more in-depth. But to start with our aging locks and dam system. There's $37 billion in agriculture and food products that flow through the Illinois ports and waterways. Upgrading aging locks and dams on the upper Mississippi and Illinois rivers is a top priority for the growers that I represent in my region. Congress has authorized these upgrades, but the administration has to request the funding. And what I'd ask of you, if you can answer with a yes or no, that'd be appreciated, but can we count on you to push this administration to invest in our water infrastructure? And specifically, will you push for 1,200-foot locks on the upper Mississippi and Illinois rivers in the President's infrastructure plan?
Yes, in the broad answer. Specifically on the 1,200-foot dam, we'll look at that and see. I was at the White House yesterday over an infrastructure meeting, and let me tell you that inland waterways right at the top of their list over the contribution to the economy. We know how much important it is to the ag economy. You know, I was on the banks of the Ohio River in Cincinnati the other day and saw some of those barge loading facilities. It's a huge advantage for U.S. economy and producers especially. We've got other parts in the world in South America that can compete with us production-wise, but they don't have the infrastructure. That wonderful river network that runs through your state and all through the middle of our nation is a vital resource for a world economy. So anything we can do, I commit to being a serious advocate for American agriculture. The logistics part is part of that, and the waterways are right at the front of that.
Yeah, we have the legislation. I think it's just a matter of authorizing the expenditure on that. And I would like to offer an invitation to you to come see the locks and dam system along the Mississippi River. That's the entire western border of my district is the Mississippi, and seeing the locks and dams that were built in the 1930s that really need a lot of attention. But we'd love to have you come and visit us. So consider that an invitation. Quickly, shifting gears, yesterday the Joint Economic Committee released a report outlining many of the economic challenges in rural America, which I'd like to have entered into the record. But I'd also like to acknowledge something that Congresswoman Fudge said earlier, that I'm concerned about the Trump administration budget that calls for a 21% cut in USDA, including eliminating rural development's water infrastructure programs and the rural business and cooperative service. Just a big concern, and I think that can be echoed. You'll probably hear some other questions from my colleagues here. But the reorganization also eliminates the rural development mission area entirely, as well as the Senate confirmed undersecretary, which you've addressed for a moment. But it's my understanding that you've already submitted the reorganization to Congress for the mandatory 30-day notification period. However, just today you sought public comment through a Federal Register notice on the proposal. So wondering why the formal reorganization plan to Congress, why that was presented to Congress before seeking impact or feedback from the impacted stakeholders. Just your thought on kind of that order of that.
I'm not sure I can answer that question specifically other than I've given my vision and we are progressing in the protocol as I understand it, directed by our general counsel to implement this. I visited with your chair and ranking member here, the chair and ranking member of Ag Appropriations to let them know of my plans and to do that. So I may not be as tuned to the federal requirements of permission as there, but all I know is my heartbeat is to make good and to do well and to make sure USDA continues to serve customers in the best way. I can't answer the specific process questions that you asked.
Okay, I think your mic might have gone out for a second there.
I think I got cut off.
All right. We still want to hear you. All right. Well, I'm hoping that you will listen to that feedback that's offered, and I'm sure you will. The other thing is, will someone in your office take on the day-to-day management responsibilities of leading rural development with this new structure? You know, it's a staff of 5,000. It's a loan portfolio of more than $225 billion. And for that to go straight up to you, the concern is just the attention that's going to be given to rural development. It's a big concern.
No, I can't handle all that myself. We're going to have an assistant secretary directly reporting to me that will be the go-to person. If you want to, you know, if it makes you feel better to call that person undersecretary, then, you know, enjoy that. But that person is going to have not only the responsibility of managing that portfolio, doing what we were doing that way, but also having direct access so we can move quickly and nimbly with a vision of improving rural America. So that is important. That person will be Senate confirmed in that area, so you'll have an opportunity to visit with that person and ask them all those questions of their commitment and passion to rural development.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My time has expired. I'll yield back.
Gentlelady is back. Mr. Desjardins, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Secretary Perdue. Your presence is greatly appreciated here this morning. I represent Tennessee's 4th Congressional District, is home to the National Tennessee Walking Horse Celebration. With a nationwide economic impact of approximately $3.2 billion, the Tennessee walking horse industry directly or indirectly employs over 20,000 people in largely rural areas and farming communities where economic hardship is commonplace. The previous administration obstructed progress and refused to cooperate with the industry to develop scientific inspection methods to replace the current subjective methods prone to error. Can folks in Tennessee count on you to be supportive of the walking horse industry and facilitate scientific and objective inspection methods to eliminate soaring so that people can continue to enjoy this time-honored tradition?
Certainly. I'd love to comment on that. As you know, we've delayed that rule in order that we can get the facts about that. Beautiful horses, beautiful animals, but we've got to balance that with our humane treatment. That's what APHIS does. And I think for the reputation of the wonderful people in the walking horse industry, they want the bad actors out as much as anyone does. So that's what we hope to have, a regulatory protocol that will ensure that how the enforcement operates in that, how that's done, best assures the public that these animals are not being treated inhumanely in order for them to perform. So I welcome that.
All right, we'll look forward to working with you on that. The Tennessee Cattlemen's Association appreciates the establishment of Undersecretary for Trade position created in the 2014 Farm Bill. How are the bilateral agreements progressing with the countries that had been part of the TPP agreement? And many of these countries, as you know, offer significant market opportunities for U.S. beef, and I hope that under your leadership we can count on you to negotiate these bilateral agreements.
Well, certainly, I think the two great wins in that area is American beef back into Brazil already the first shipment, and I hope we'll be able to announce very soon and show you a picture of U.S. beef going into China, which is a huge market. So I think your cattlemen are looking forward to that. There are technical issues to continue to resolve. When dealing with some of the international buyers, it's the Yogi Berra philosophy, it ain't over till it's over. So that's what we're working on.
Any updates on Japan?
Japan, again, Secretary Ross, President, obviously asked me to write him a letter that he could handwrite a note on to the President when he met with the President of Japan to indicate again the protocols that we need to do to get back into there as well.
And Secretary, as you know, the nation's poultry industry has been reeling from devastating outbreaks of high pathogenic avian influenza the past several years. Most recently, which occurred in my district, a GAO report released last week highlighted that USDA has taken significant steps to respond to the crisis, but a few ways to determine the effectiveness of these steps. In your opinion, how can our farmers enhance biosecurity and make their livestock less susceptible to the introduction of disease?
As indicated earlier in my testimony, I'm very, very pleased with the reaction of your Tennessee state authorities in conjunction with our USDA APHIS people over the containment of the recent outbreak in south central Tennessee. I thought that was the way the system should work. There was very timely action toward depopulation and eliminating the potential spread of that disease. And I think it's been long enough now that if that had not been effective, we would have seen that. So I think the system is working. We learned a lot from 2015, and your state, Alabama, and the states of Georgia all collaborated very, very well to make sure that the high path was contained. So I think we're making progress. Can we do better? We can always do better.
All right. Well, again, congratulations. We're glad that you're finally in place. That took too long, but we're glad to have you, and thanks for being here today. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman goes back. Mr. Evans, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. How are you?
Good morning.
I know, Mr. Secretary, you are a veterinarian by trade, and that Pennsylvania is the home of one of the greatest veterinarian schools in the nation, University of Penn. I was just visiting that school last week. Can you share the importance of veterinarian programs that you look to strengthen as it relates to our nation? I don't hear a lot about that, and obviously I'm really concerned, and also the aspect of diversity added to the element of veterinarians. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, when it comes to food safety, Congressman, there's a zero tolerance policy, and that's what Americans expect. That's what we come to benefit from, and the veterinary profession is intimately involved in that. When I graduated from veterinary school in 1971, I had volunteered for an assignment in the United States Air Force. I don't know that I realized that would be a food safety and public health mission there. So when I served in Ohio, it was food safety and public health, and I got a really broad perspective of how important that was. That the food safety industry and profession had not matured at that time in the 70s, but I learned a lot about it, was trained in that area. We've got great veterinarians and our inspection services all over. And while you're correct, your veterinary school in Pennsylvania is one of the renowned ones, along with Iowa State, Kansas, and others that, along with my alma mater, University of Georgia, have done a great job putting out professionals who are part of that food safety network. We also got great career professionals in USDA under the guidance of veterinarians who are making a great work in that. Much of the foodborne illness you see happens after that in the supply chain, the delivery, in restaurants and others, but we're committed to a zero tolerance policy to make sure that the food that Americans feed their families are safe.
Secretary, in Pennsylvania, I was in the state legislature, and we dealt with the issue of Pennsylvania of food deserts and food insecurity, and came up with a program called the FFI program, which was a public-private partnership that worked to address food deserts. How do you seek to address food insecurity and food deserts?
Well, I think, again, some of the programs that you all have funded, that we have the opportunity to award some grants regarding fresh vegetables and others. It's a healthy food program that we are, Finney is one of them, in that area, as well as another one that has to deal with those problems. There's very little money in that, frankly, but we've used pilot projects to understand how we can make sure that those people in the areas where food's not readily available have access, be it local farmers markets or other ways, and certainly to be able to use their food supplemental nutrition program to access those. So we look forward to understanding better how we can even do better in that regard.
I've always said that food policy is foreign policy, and we know that food is a bipartisan issue that we all have to eat. What would you do to ensure that everyone on the spectrum, from neighborhoods to global food economy, prioritize the importance of food policy?
Well, we talked about, I want the motto to be more than just a motto, do right and feed everyone. We've got an awesome opportunity in this country as abundant food suppliers for the world, and that doesn't exclude our American citizens too, who are less have less opportunity for food safety and food nutrition. But the fact is that whether it's a PL 480 program, Food for Peace, McGovern-Dole, or others, I hope that we can see these programs sustained and be able to use the bountiful production of our American producers in order to be a weapon for peace around the world.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Lamar for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's really great to have you here, and I hope things are going well for you and your transition. And it's also very heartening to hear the colleagues that you know the best, our Georgia colleagues that have welcomed you here today, and the nonpartisan way which everybody likes working with you. So that's a really good indicator compared to some of the things going on around this town. So many issues here. I'm hoping, of course, that we see a rebound in commodity, ag commodities at the farm gate there, and then we can see exports, expected to come back up a little bit from a peak of just a few years ago. We have a lot of issues going on. I have a Northern California district, top of the state, and one of the things that we're very, very concerned about is USDA's oversight of the Forest Service and the need to be much better managing our federal lands and moving more into biomass, using this over inventory we have of forest products out there that really need to be managed much better, as we have wildfires every year, and we have need to incentivize the biomass situation. So as we work on the federal land issue, what do you think we can do to grow the markets for biomass, have more economic activity that would be jobs right in our own backyard for a material that needs to be moved right out of our backyard for private land and federal land? What do you think we can do more in that area for biomass?
One of the things that has not been talked about in our realignment, reorganization, had to do with aligning NRCS in their mission area with Farm FSA and that. That leaves NRE really with the responsibility of managing our U.S. Forest Service. That's where over a third of the employees in USDA are, and that's frankly where some of the biggest challenges have come from. We face litigation, we face NEPA challenges and other kinds of things in order to utilize the renewable resources on all of our millions of acres out here, Northern California and many other states, to do that. Actually, that means jobs as well. The good news about the fact is a healthy forest is less vulnerable to fire, and you all know that the fire budget has kind of gotten upside down in the Forest Service. We're spending more to fight fires than we are to prevent fires. We hope to get that corrected with your help and reestablished. But I believe, again, a mission area that's focused directly on here, utilizing the renewable aspects of whether it's deadfall going into biomass or recovering these trees that might be down. They've got a certain period of time that you can harvest them, and they would be good lumber to get ahead of that curve. The challenge is right now, so much of that budget is spent in suppression rather than prevention, and we've got to get ahead of that. But that's my desire.
It's switched from 1/3 of the budget to 2/3 over the years. We're trying to adjust that with other legislation.
That's right.
And you mentioned NEPA too. That's very frustrating. After a fire you've already had, the need to get in there and salvage within a short amount of time. We got to get it done. Instead, we waste sometimes a year and a half, and the value of the wood is pretty much shot by then. Then it's just a detriment out there. Also, you did mention merging NRCS and others. That sounds like a great idea to have these folks be able to all speak in the same language. I also have a very large rice acreage that's in my district, and my real life, I'm a rice farmer as well. Talked with Mr. Crawford about that a lot. California's #1 in medium grain, okay? So, and thank you for meeting with some of our California folks earlier this week as well, too, rice. We just need, a little more help in the exports on that, getting more of that product into Japan. There's a lot of disappointment over the TPP with only opening up another 50,000 tons, which mean about 7 other growers could grow that ourselves. So that didn't mean a whole lot. So maybe as that comes back around, we can see a little more entry for rice as well as other exports. Lastly, and I'd just like to hear what you think on this. We did hear a little mention of SNAP earlier. We've had a lot of hearings on that during this last year, very comprehensive. And it keeps coming up, the issue of SNAP, which I think is a program this committee very strongly supports, but the way it's targeted, and there's a lot of issues with some of the products being used for, SNAP is being used for soda and candy and things like that that aren't generally healthy, where I think the original intent was ag products that come from here. Could you just touch in general on what you feel the direction should be with SNAP and what kind of products we should be using with that? And thank you.
Well, I think our desire as parents and grandparents is that the people who take advantage of SNAP would use them for healthy food products. That's the balance of at what level do we want to become a nanny state of directing how people, what they feed their families. So that's the challenge in that. And I probably lean more to the laissez-faire rather than the prescriptive in that area, from a perspective of not wanting to, if parents and people who use the SNAP benefits are not doing that at home, I don't know that we can corral them enough with restrictions and SNAP to make them do that. So it's a really dicey issue of how we do that. I think we try to do it through education and through examples and allowing SNAP to be used at local farmers markets and making sure in our school program that the free vegetables and fruits are there so our kids can get used to that, and hopefully won't ask mom and dad for more of that than they would other things. But that we've got, and someone mentioned earlier, and I wanted to comment on it then, but we've got a serious obesity problem in our youth. How do we not only get a good food program, nutrition program, but how do we get a good activity program going as well? All that's complicated, complex, but it needs to be all of our business about that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back to you.
Jim's time has expired. Mr. Soto, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Perdue, thank you for coming today. I represent Central Florida, your neighbor to the south, and we all here today have some of the great orange juice that's developed in Central Florida. But I do want to say, if we don't get citrus greening under control, it'll be Brazilian orange juice pretty soon. Our production is down 70% over the last decade, and while we're developing resistant rootstocks, I wanted to gauge your commitment on continuing the robust funding to address this crisis that could eliminate all Florida citrus if we don't get a handle on it.
Done. It's obviously a serious issue. It's been a tenacious pest, and research is important to get that done, but we need to build that barrier. You're well aware of how many acres have been just plowed up in Florida over in the citrus industry. So I'm a great consumer of that product you have in your hand there, and I want us to have more of it.
Well, we appreciate that. In addition, we have a large cattle industry in and around my district, including the largest herd in the nation at Deseret Ranch, and we appreciate your commitment to help modernize the North American FMD vaccine bank. Do want to bring to your attention what you may already know. We had a small screwworm outbreak in the Keys, which was a pretty strange place for that to happen. While that's under control, it just highlights that we still have risk to Florida cattle. And one other thing, I know my local cattle ranchers will be sending you an invite to the Ram Rodeo in Osceola County. I encourage you to come along if you can make it, or one of our others. It's part of our tradition there. The other issue I wanted to bring up is there's been reports that foreign farmers are bringing in fruits and vegetables labeled as organic that are not organic. And in Florida, we're working on protecting a fruit and vegetable industry that is really struggling under low wages coming through areas like Mexico and Central America. So it's a twofold question. What do you think we can do to assist in making sure organic means just that, particularly from foreign commodities? And what do you think we could do within the NAFTA confines to trigger higher wages under the existing provisions of NAFTA in Mexico and other areas?
Regarding the organic issue, certainly that's become a valuable brand as we see the growth from consumers wanting more of that. The way the oversight works in that from USDA is we we authorize or legitimize the certifiers, many times state agencies, to go out and make sure this, the principles and the processes and the programs that define organic are being carried out. As you might imagine, that's not a 24/7 type inspection. It works much like the Environmental Protection Agency authorizes state EPDs to work in that regard as well. So that's a challenge. I think our goal is to have better education of these authorizing certifiers and to maybe do some auditing out here and not only of the certifiers but on the ground as well to do that. We want to jealously guard the legitimate, and I think there's some legitimate concern regarding cheaters coming into the country with organic labels that aren't following organic processes. So it's a very important responsibility of USDA. We have to leverage that because there's no way for USDA to have enough inspectors on the ground everywhere to certify organics. But in working with our authorized certifiers, and we'll just try to do a better job in making sure those people who are violating the rules are not allowed to do that, continue to do that.
And then on the wage disparity through NAFTA in Mexico and then also in other trade treaties in Central and South America, how could we help make sure that our agricultural products and fruits and vegetables can be competitive under existing provisions?
Certainly, I think our vegetable and our produce section of agriculture and your people in South Florida and the growth in Florida have maybe been the ones that have not benefited as much from NAFTA as the rice or the grain producers or even dairy in that way. It's a real challenge, but most of the challenge comes from the counter-cyclical culture of growth. I mean, they're lower in the hemisphere than we are and can grow things different seasonally in that way. But we've got to make sure that the safety of those products is just what we insist on in our American producers as well. And as regarding NAFTA and the negotiations, my hope and my advocacy will be that we don't go backward in that, but to see that's one of the areas where I think we probably can improve our position vis-a-vis Mexico with regarding fruits and vegetables.
Chairman's time has expired. Mr. Yoho, 5 minutes.
Secretary Perdue, thanks for being here. I feel a kindred spirit being a fellow veterinarian, and I don't know what to call you, Doc, Governor, or Secretary. If you're like me, you probably prefer Doc. And I look forward to helping you achieve your mission. The way you opened up and everything you've said, I'm in alignment, and it just sounds like you've got common sense. I can only feel that comes from working on the south end of a horse or a cow in your past. But what you were talking about, I look forward to helping you achieve your goal of making a realignment of the USDA to make it the most efficient agency in government. And I think that's such a critical thing, knowing the debt that our country's facing. We have to get more, do more with less, and I look forward to working with you on that. And you also talked about the USDA stamp is the most, it should be revered and trusted. And I agree, because that stamp around the world stands for the highest quality product that you can get. And I think it's so important that we protect it. And several of the things I wanted to talk about were already talked about. Your understanding of FMD it's music to my ears. There was a point up here where it wasn't talked about much, and we know the threat. We haven't had that here since 1929. If it comes here, it would be devastating, and certainly we know what happened with BSC with the 3 cases that were here, and how long it's just now taking us to recover after 15 years, and that was with no depopulation of any of the herds. And certainly if we had an FMD outbreak, it would be devastating. It would take years and years to recover not just our cattle herd, but our trade. And as we look forward, I look forward to working with you on this coming, the new Farm Bill. To make continued improvements in the cotton program, as was talked about, but not at the expense of other crops, i.e. peanuts. I come from Florida, north central Florida, and the cottonseed program is something we talked about to help give diversification to the cotton growers. And that's something that I hope you would consider and looking at. But what we know is with these programs, you can't have one at the expense of the other one. And with peanuts, we certainly know within that one program, you have a discrepancy because you have the people that have generic and or base acres, and then you have the people that have neither, and they're growing peanuts right next to each other. One is at a disadvantage because they don't fall into a program. And we have seen people switch from cotton to grow peanuts because of the farm program. And there's some things that can be fixed in that. And I hope you'll look at that. And not to penalize anybody, but just to give that, I guess, parity on one peanut field to the next so that those farmers can stay in business, especially the young farmers that we see. And we've got several things that we've put together. What I'd like to do is have a meeting with you, maybe your staff, and go over some of the things. And then coming from Florida, we have over 360 specialty crops in Florida. Florida's known for #1 in the nation for melons, sweet corn, and citrus, even with citrus screening, as Mr. Soto brought out. We went from 470 million boxes, we're down to under 70 million boxes. It's something that has to be dealt with, and we look forward to the robust funding that USDA has done. And I guess one of my asks for you is the research and development that we're doing is so vitally important, and again, USDA has been great on this, that we take that research and development, because we know one of the cures is probably going to be a GMO tree, to have the USDA help in marketing those products, and that's something I would like to see USDA get involved now to move to where we can start marketing that stuff. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, let me address, you mentioned several things. Let me think of that, and then I can address your final question. But certainly from the vigilance over foot and mouth, as well as any other disease, Dr. Congressman, you know that we thought we were done with screwworms, and yet we have these things kind of break out and very quickly contain. But you have to be vigilant otherwise. With your professional training, even the zoonoses that are threatening us around the world, we've got to be there. And I think the USDA inspectors and the food safety are the front line safety net that we have in doing that. So I look forward to discussing that with you. Secondly, on the issue of peanuts and generic base, I think there probably needs to be look at maybe some adjustments on generic base and the way they're used going forward. That would probably be our recommendation, but that's a time for another discussion. The goal and the principle in the Farm Bill, I think, whether it be crop insurance or the ARC or PLC, is let the market determine what our producers grow, not the programs. And that's my goal, is to let them look at market signals and determine what they want to plant, not that I've got to plant this because that's a better program crop than here. So we don't want to change people's habit of what they do well and how they do it. And we've seen some of that change, obviously, from cotton to peanuts through the 14 Farm Bill to do that as well. Now, you're going to have to repeat your last question for me because
I'll send it to your office because I'm out of time, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Doctor.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Perdue, on behalf of the state of Delaware, I'd like to say congratulations on your confirmation and also to welcome you. I have a good friend who is our Secretary of Agriculture in Delaware, Michael Skuse, and he said to say hello to you and that it would be a great pleasure to work with you, so I'm looking forward to that.
Good.
I want to follow up on a question that Representative Bustos asked earlier. In my different roles in the state of Delaware, one of them was as state personnel director. So when you talked about the reorganization and the realignment, I was interested specifically in the undersecretary position for rural development. And I know that it is one that carries significant weight. You talked about it as well, the different responsibilities and now pulling it closer to your office. And I just was hoping you could clarify. It's my understanding that there are many functions that the undersecretary is legally able to perform that a special assistant would not be able to perform. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with that. I don't know that that would have influenced my decision had I thought that. I think with the Assistant Secretary reporting directly to me, I can't believe that would be diminished. You're going to have directors in in the three areas of rural development with utility services, water, and community facilities. So you'll still have directors in that with the same sub-agents mission areas there. My expectation is that those people will continue to report to the Assistant Secretary. If their powers or influence or ability to operate are diminished, we'll just have to figure out how we resolve that.
Great. So maybe we can just follow up just to clarify that after the fact.
Sure.
And then the other question was, the Undersecretary was Senate confirmed, and this would be appointed, is that?
Our expectation is this Assistant Secretary will be confirmed as well.
Confirmed as
Yeah.
well. Okay, great. And then the other question that I had was, I was really pleased to hear you say, if they grow it, we want to sell it. And the whole focus on trade really sparked my interest. And given your high priority on enhancing trade opportunities in the U.S. agricultural products, can you share with the committee your views on FAST programs like the Technical Assistance for Specialty Crops and the MAP Market Access Program? Do you support these programs remaining as critical tools in USDA's trade toolbox?
Absolutely. You represent a state that's understood in your poultry industry how much export and how much trade affects that. The good news is we've got a poultry ecosystem in this nation, Delaware, Georgia, Arkansas, and across the country that is just unable to be replicated, from the feed grains and the processing and the growing, and it's a great blessing to do that. So all these tools, we've got to have those tools and more available, because our producers are going to challenge us. So that they can grow it. They've demonstrated they can grow it. And the challenge would be to feed that hungry world with trade and export. So we need all those tools available.
Great. Thank you so much, and I yield back my time.
Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Abraham, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Perdue. Certainly, as another fellow veterinarian, as Dr. Yoho said, we're glad to have you. As a fellow farmer, we're glad to have you, and I'm sure General General Bacon, who's sitting right in front of me, as a Air Force veteran, is glad that he is a fellow Air Force veteran sitting in your chair. We're so happy. We certainly look for a close relationship, and for a man that is governor, stood on the Capitol steps during a severe drought and prayed for rain, and then shortly thereafter addressed record flooding, I definitely want to be closer to you if things go south. So you've answered certainly most of my questions. The chairman had one on the cottonseed issue, and that's very near and dear to me in Louisiana. The ranking member brought up the state directorship of rural development and FSA, when they would be filled. And then I think Mr. Crawford brought up the practical to replant issue, which hit us right between the eyes in Louisiana with the flooding last year. So I appreciate you addressing all those issues. The quick question I do want to ask is that with furrow irrigation rice, your agency has allowed that to become an insured crop, and in Louisiana, we certainly appreciate that. And as you know, with the furrow irrigated rice, they tend to use the blast-resistant seed. And for those here that don't know what that's a fungus that affects rice and just devastates yields. And if they use that seed, that blast-resistant seed, production goes up, yield per acre, and certainly water usage goes down. So it's a great thing. And my question is, when can we expect approval or final approval of this process to take place?
Congressman, you got me underwater on your rice production right now, so
Okay. Well, I'll submit it to you.
that's something we will have to check on and to understand that, because
Okay, that's no problem.
as a non-rice farmer, I'm familiar generally with the
Okay.
protocols, but not specifically that. And I can't give you a specific answer, but I can assure you we'll get you one.
Okay, fair enough. And just one other quick question then on my sugar farmers. RMA has kicked their crop insurance premiums up about 45%, and I've talked to my Farm Bureau people, and they don't have any actuarial numbers to explain that increase. Does your agency yet have a reason as to why the sugar farmers got that increase in their premiums?
Well, again, we can get you the answer. The RMA has a board, as you know, that is responsible for setting the actuarial risk tolerances in that. And but that's part of USDA, and I think you and your farmers, your constituents, have a right to answer that. I'm hoping the answer would be that it's actuarially risk-based, and that's what's been demonstrated. If that's the case, then it's hard to argue with that, but we'll find the answer out for that as
If we've
well.
got the objective data, I would be good, but talking to our Farm Bureau people, they say, well, the data's not there. But anyway, we'll have the discussion. I appreciate the forthright, and look forward to working with you. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Jim yields back. Mr. Lawson, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee. I represent West Florida, and so, but one of the things is interesting, within my district, 1 in every 4 Floridians have been on SNAP. At some point over the last 12 months, twice the national average, And so what level of commitment do you see that we can give to those of us in Congress that have this kind of food insecurity in our area to either enhance the SNAP program? And I was very interested in some of the information that you talked about earlier about education, when someone said about what these people have in their baskets in the grocery store, because growing up in a rural area in a community where involved in a lot of farming, all of us as kids, wanted candy and different things in that basket as a part of what kids actually do. How would you advise food banks to prepare for the added demand if SNAP cuts in the Farm Bill?
I think one of the ways, and what you indicated in your district, what we need to educate people on is that SNAP usage is just not in urban areas. We've got a huge rural utilization of SNAP as well in those areas, and the good thing about using those fresh fruits and vegetables you all grow down there is extremely helpful. Food banks, I think one of the things we can do in food banks is develop a wonderful progressive food waste program, where many of these foods that we ought to be ashamed as a nation over our waste of some products while some people go hungry. And I think to develop programs where we can coordinate with our food banks in these underserved areas with safe food waste issues, policies that make sense, and maybe removing some of the things that don't make sense may be one of the areas that we can work on together.
Right, and early on, Congressman Scott spoke about the 1890 institutions, and I happen to represent Florida A&M University, that is one of them. And in the early years, there was quite a great deal of interest in agriculture and people return. In fact, my father-in-law was the farm manager, at the university, and it was a great deal of interest in students who were coming out. When I came up, as you say, I was in the FFA, 4-H club, and all of those areas that help you get very acquainted with farm products, growing cattle, and poultry and so forth. But they have been underfunded, and I really feel similar to what, and I know you have the institution in Georgia, which right across the line, that we really can enhance that opportunity for students that are going in. You made a statement earlier about if you don't have these out here, these cell phones or other activity, that's what the young people really need, and the technology that go along with it. And so my question is that what can we do when working on the Farm Bill to make sure that we engage those institutions more with the funding they need to develop more farm? My father was Tuskegee, father-in-law at Tuskegee, where they did a lot of research with the peanuts and all this other stuff, and so that sets the mold for the future of feeding everyone, like you talked about. But those institutions need to get more engaged.
You represent the Rattlers?
Yes.
I think the good opportunity, you mentioned FFA, and not only what Congressman Scott talked about with our HBUCs, is that the opportunity to start earlier is helpful in these areas. And what I'm really impressed about FFA and 4-H is I had a teletown hall with FFA across the country in about 6 or 8 places when I was in the school in Virginia, and the minority participation was amazing. And it thrilled me to see young minority students there interested in FFA projects, and not only from a production standpoint, but from the leadership it provides. So anything you all can do, anything we all can do to encourage these young people, that's how we're going to change that ultimate question of the aging of American agriculture and how that does. But Congressman Scott, connectivity, we got to make it where they want to come back, and we also talked about the science and the technology. We got to help them with the capital inputs there on the front end to let them start and understand how they can grow bigger in that ways. But education, and a huge part of it, our extensions agent working with 4-H is also critical to inspire them. I mean, I've known some young people who would have been on the streets had it not been for 4-H and FFH. That gave them purpose. And anything we can do on those programs, I think, is money well repaid many times over.
Jim is highly inspired. Mr. Kelly, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary. I'm from Mississippi, and as you're aware, the conditions in cotton country just aren't good right now. And I know that the chairman started out with that, but farmers in my state are telling me that they can't make it through another year without some relief from somewhere. I can't overemphasize how important this is, because as you know, Secretary, once we lose that cotton infrastructure, you just can't go back and re-get it there. And so I just want to make sure that you're going to explore all the options that you can to work with us to take care of our cotton farmers so that we don't lose the ability to produce cotton in the future.
I'll commit to you to do that. Certainly the disappointment in the latest budget issues was a kind of a tough slug for us, because it limits my opportunities, limits my ability extremely there. But I've committed to the chairman, you know that he's concerned about that, to do anything we can from USDA to help relieve that.
And I would be remiss, when Secretary Vilsack was here, I brought up to him on that, he ruled that cottonseed oil was not included in the other oils. I disagree from a legal standpoint, being a lawyer. I just hope that you will relook and make that your assessment, not his assessment. I don't think, the law is not always black and white. Sometimes it's gray. But I can see where reasonable minds can differ on whether or not cottonseed oil should be included in the other oils or not, and I actually think that it should. And so I ask that you relook at that and at least come to your own assessment on that.
We will. I think, again, certainly cotton producers believe that the Secretary has that authority. I think, again, as a non-lawyer, I have to rely upon my general counsel in that area, and we'll do so.
Okay. And then I guess the final thing is, I'm also, several stakeholders are contacting me about your reorganization plans for replacing the USDA Undersecretary for Rural Development. And what can you do? And are you listening to their fears and the things? Are you listening to them? And what are you doing to alleviate some of those fears?
I think the fears is the proof's in the pudding. I'm willing to be held accountable. We've talked about it a good bit in here this morning about I view it as an elevation with influence and access and rural development rather than just a title. It's unfortunate that the media chose to portray it as a diminishment of importance of rural development, and that's not the case. We're doing everything we can to persuade people, and I think, again, we're willing to be shown. I'm an output kind of guy, so wait and watch and see what I do. And that's what I would tell your producers is that I've brought this up, and I'm convinced the fellow wants to do more, not less.
I'm very proud that you're here, Secretary. We have high expectations from you, but most importantly, I'm glad because you don't have an accent like most of these people up here. And with that, I yield back.
Jim yields back. Mr. Panetta, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your confirmation, and thank you very much, not only for your past service to the state of Georgia, but for your future service to our nation as Secretary of Agriculture. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to come here, and it's an honor to be in front of you to ask you these questions, have this opportunity. Once again, my name is Jimmy Panetta. I represent the Central Coast of California, what my colleagues know as, based on my advertising, and I'll tell you, the salad bowl of the world. We have plenty of specialty crops in that area. And at this point, I'll be so brash as to personally invite you out to the Central Coast of California so that you can reinforce your understanding of specialty crops and also what it takes to harvest these specialty crops. And what I mean by that, and what you know and what you've heard, is labor. And that's been an issue. Obviously, California, like Georgia, experienced some droughts, especially one in the past few years, excluding this year, thankfully. But even during that drought, the number one issue for our people in agriculture, especially on the Central Coast, was immigration, was labor force. And now, based on the political atmosphere in this country, based on the changing socioeconomic atmosphere in Mexico and southern and Central America, and based on Congress's failure to do anything on immigration since 1986, it's not just an issue, it's an emergency. And I tell you, every single person that I speak to in agriculture, farmer to farm worker, they will tell you that the lack of labor force is the number one most pressing issue that they're facing right now, and it is an emergency situation. And so I appreciate your statement during confirmation to Senator Gillibrand when she asked if you had a commitment to making sure that producers had access to farm workers, and your response was, "I will certainly commit to you. I will commit to you that, Senator." And then right today to Representative Costa, you said, "I will help to provide a way forward when it comes to immigration and making sure that there's labor there to help us harvest our crops." If I could, Mr. Secretary, could you please elaborate what your commitment is and how you will help provide a way forward?
Certainly. I smile because with your Western growers the other day, we were talking about produce and melons and those kind of things, and we were talking about this very issue. And I said, well, when I grew up, my father, we were a diversified row crop farm, but he loved truck farming. He loved melons, watermelons, cantaloupes, beans, and sweet corn. But I was that immigrant labor right there handling those watermelons. So I know what it takes to harvest them, and I know that it's very, very difficult to get domestic labor to do that any longer. And it's not really a matter of taking American jobs at any cost. We had a situation in Georgia where the legislature felt like they needed to have a tough immigration bill, and it really flushed out a lot of the harvest labor that we had there in Georgia. And there was an example where the governor said, we'll let probationers do this. And so they did that for a day or so. But after about a half a day, the guy said, "Can we go back to prison?" Because they just weren't willing to do that work. So we understand it. The good news is, I think the president understands as well. This roundtable that we had, I think he understands the contribution that immigrant labor has made to our fields and farms and processing and other things. We know from poultry processing and other things, there's a lot of immigrant labor. When I said a way forward, I don't know that I can elaborate on the path today, but I have specifically hired a young woman who's a lawyer from Nebraska who worked with Farm Bureau, whose expertise is in farm labor. And what we want to do is to give to my boss and administration an opportunity and to thread the needle over this issue of how we utilize immigrant labor in this nation. I believe the heart's there, the how-to and the process right now is what we have to figure out. but I can tell you, trade, labor, regulations are job 1, 2, and 3.
Great, great. I appreciate that. Thank you. And briefly, in order to make up for the lack of labor, does the USDA plan on any sort of investment in agriculture technology and ways forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. I gave those guys the same example of that. While we got the wonderful land grant institutions that Congressman Scott talked about, we also got some technology schools that are using great processing technology, harvest technology, and preserving technology that make a lot of sense. So we're going to look at where our research dollars go. If it makes sense to have a processing, harvesting part of the whole supply chain to benefit agriculture, we'll do that. Our example in Georgia, as Congressman Scott knows, is that while our land grant, primary land grants, the University of Georgia as well as Fort Valley State, Georgia Tech Engineering School does a lot of work with poultry processing and how to make that more efficient and better. So those are the types of things we want to look at to make sure that we use those research dollars wisely, not just maybe in the basic production or applied production science, but how we get that product in a safe, palatable way to the consumer.
Great. Thank you. I yield back.
Jim's time has expired. Mr. Comer, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, I'm so glad to see that you are now the Agriculture Secretary, and everything I've read about you was excellent, and just hearing your testimony is really reassuring to me. I've always said I think it should be a prerequisite that the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture should have a farm background. I know you have an excellent track record in farming and agribusiness, and I'm looking very forward to working with you. I represent 35 counties in Kentucky, 35 rural counties, and there are 6 congressional districts in Kentucky. But when you look at the total agriculture sales in Kentucky, the overwhelming majority of those sales come from the 1st Congressional District of Kentucky. We have poultry, we have beef cattle, corn, wheat, horses, and a lot of tobacco. Tobacco is still a very important crop in Kentucky. My question is, in many instances, the previous administration promulgated regs that were unachievable. For example, the FDA pushed forward a proposed rule at the very last minute that would limit NNN, I'm going to say nitroso-nor-nicotine, in smokeless tobacco to levels lower than growers could achieve. Will you commit to use sound scientific data in rulemaking and work with farmers and ranchers in drafting regulations to ensure that they are realistic and practical?
I will, Congressman. I think, again, my mantra has been sound science, fact-based, data-driven, customer-focused decisions, and that's what we hope to do. That's a balance, obviously. As you know today, we've used science in a way that sometimes comes from an ideological perspective.
Right.
And we've got a sound science definition is in the eye of the beholder. So we've got to make sure at USDA we have an agendaless investigation and things that come out without a predetermined conclusion over our scientific discovery that help us lead. I'm not smart enough to create intuitively programs and policies without data, without science, without facts to do that. So I agree with you. The other part about that, when you talked about the agency that promulgated that, Dr. Tom Price and I, Secretary Price and I, served in the state Senate. We've already talked about some interagency working between delineating FDA's role and USDA's role in some of these areas. The good news about the President's interagency task force over rural prosperity was we get to talk about with different people how your rules affect my people and how my rules may affect your people in that regard. So we want to collaborate in a holistic approach to government, I think like I've not seen before. That's the Secretary of Interior, FDA, HHS, Commerce, and Energy, and those working together. The EPA administrator, I told Scott Pruitt, I said, I think my guys are much more excited about you than they are me. So those kind of folks,
we like you both.
Interagency.
Well, that's very reassuring, and I appreciate that, and again, look forward to working with you on that. Back on that, the FDA's proposed rule on NNN invites the USDA, pursuant to the Tobacco Control Act, to submit an economic impact statement on growers for the record. Does the USDA intend to submit such a report?
if that's what the requirement is on this rule, again, I'm not knowledgeable specifically about that. We'll get you the specifics on it. But if that's what we're asked to do, our economists certainly will talk about the impact of that rule. And that's where we need to look at risk rewards on here, irrespective of how we feel about tobacco. My father convinced me it was unhealthy when I was in the 6th grade, but nonetheless, we know it's an industry and it's important to your district.
Very well, and thank you. The one quick question. When I'm back in Kentucky, one question that always comes up in talking with ag groups is, when will we have a state FSA director? Do you have any idea of a timeline for the nomination of state FSA directors?
I'd love to say as soon as possible. Obviously, we are collating and collecting all those names now.
Right.
You all have an awesome role in helping to recommend who those people are, because you know your people in your state better than we do. And as we start to roll those out as soon as possible, we understand those state offices and rural development and the FSA, we need those as quickly as possible. And we'll commit to doing it as expeditiously as we possibly can.
Great. And I'll close with this. And you don't have to reply to this, my time's about out, but when I was the Kentucky Ag Commissioner, we had 2 new crops come online in Kentucky because we had processors. We had canola, which you're familiar with, and another one which you may not be as familiar with, industrial hemp. After the last Farm Bill, Kentucky implemented an industrial hemp program that has been a great success, and I'm looking forward to working with the House to advance policies that continue to grow on that and bring industrial hemp forward as a legal, viable commodity. I'm working with Senator McConnell on that. I look forward to working with you and the USDA to find a reasonable, responsible path forward for industrial hemp to give our farmers another tool in the toolbox. And I just wanted to throw
Both of your senators have made sure I knew about the
Right.
industrial hemp, and we just got to figure out the policies of how that's corralled in a way it doesn't get abused.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Halloran. O'Halloran, excuse me. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here today. First, a couple of comments. Mr. Kelly brought up the issue of cotton. You've heard that a number of times today. I just want to make sure that I would be incorrect by not making sure that I highlighted that Arizona grows a lot of cotton also, and some of the best in the world, and that my farmers are having the same problems as has been expressed here across this committee today. And the other issue with a lot of them is they want to be able to pass their farms on to their children. And the current conditions might not allow that to occur. And the immigration issue has been brought up at each and every one of the roundtables I've had with the agriculture community within the state. Getting to a couple of other issues, though, broadband technology is so critical to rural Arizona. My district is about 1,000 square miles smaller than Georgia. So I have a lot of small towns in there. I have a lot of Native American tribes, actually 12 of them. The Navajo Nation is one of the largest, in land mass in the country. We're not going to be able to compete not only unless we have broadband, but high capacity broadband. We have to be able to compete with those sectors that are outside of rural Arizona to be able to create an opportunity for a knowledge-based economy. The other area that I have a real concern in is rural economic development and some of the programs that are going on there. The water and the infrastructure issue is critical. The skinny budget calls for elimination of water and wastewater programs. And I just I'd like to hear from you how we're going to address these issues in a meaningful way, because they've been issues decade after decade. And we still aren't making sure that rural America and our tribal nations, and just to give you an idea, the Navajo have 48% unemployment. The Hopi have 60% unemployment. And my White Mountain Apaches, where I can't get a cell signal in the middle of their town, has an unemployment rate of 80% plus. And so, Mr. Secretary, I'd just like to get a rounded opinion of how you're going to get there.
Well, again, you know I'm a former governor, and sometimes I didn't like what the revenue estimates were, but we dealt with it. Now, the other thing I learned as governor was I proposed a budget, but there was another group that had some input in what that budget was going to finally be. They were called the appropriators. So I understand that very well. I think you all have a collective wisdom regarding from your constituents over where these things need to be placed. And my commitment to you is whatever comes out of that, I'm going to make it work to the best of our ability. I hope you all have the wisdom to know where those needs are, and I trust that you will. But at this point, I'm not a proposer. I'm an administrator, and I'm going to take what comes out. We'll see what the president's budget is next week. You all will have your shot at it, and whatever you determine, I'm going to make sure we get as much value from that budget as we possibly can.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My constituents expect leadership out of me, the executive branch of government, and other people that it's necessary to find that leadership. I believe you have the capability to have that leadership and have proven that in the past. So I will look forward to working with you on these issues. The last issue I have is forest fires and the type of funding that's coming out of and being dealt with from forest fires. It takes a huge amount of money away from the ongoing maintenance of our forests and the preventative issues that will help us out in not only maintaining a critical natural resource, but in clearly identifying the need going forward of lessening the impact of forest fires on our cost. So if you can give me an idea of what direction you might be going in there.
We want to get the federal fire budget corrected and not from being upside down as soon as possible. I know that its appropriators are in a different section than the ag appropriators, but we're working with them on the House and the Senate side to help get that corrected because, you know, renewable resources, not only, we've got a great asset out here in the U.S. Forest Service lands out there that ought to be productive, revenue generating, jobs creating, and that's my goal is to get the U.S. Forest Service right size where we're in the prevention business and not the suppression business. But the prevention part of that means economic activity. It means jobs. That means we got to have the money to restore roads and make sure that loggers can get in here and get that out. It means we got to do some regulatory work over getting the litigation issues out. And the ultimate goal is to be good neighbors. I would love for our U.S. Forest Service to manage our public forest lands just as well as our private landowners are across the land. So that's my goal. It's a big challenge. It requires your help in the fire budget and maybe policy-wise in getting forest fires treated like natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, tornadoes. That may be one part of the solution. So it's a challenge I look forward to, and I hope that in 2 to 3 years you'll see we have a much more productive, renewable forest, U.S. forests, than we have now.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman's time has expired. Dr. Marshall.
Mr. Secretary, welcome. On behalf of all the hardworking farmers and ranchers that make the big 1st District of Kansas the largest agriculture producing district in the country, welcome. As Congressman Lucas mentioned, Kansas has faced more than her fair share of disasters this year, natural disasters. Early in March, we lost about 600,000 acres of grass, 10,000 head of cattle, and hundreds of miles of fence to the biggest wildfire on record. We thought we'd had enough, and then Mother Nature gave us 15 to 20 inches of snow that laid headed wheat fields flat. Disasters like these are prime examples of the need for a strong farm safety net, and I greatly personally appreciate all your department has done to help work with us in an efficient manner. They were gentlemen, professionals, every one of them, and we appreciate their help. One hole in the safety net that we have seen is the challenge, though, of current payment limits and their impact on average-sized Kansas family farms. I understand that most of these payment limits are statute, and I'm interested what authority the USDA might have to modify its limits on the Emergency Conservation Program. ECP is the primary program producers are used to replace fences and the watering facilities destroyed by the fire. Replacement of fence costs $10,000 a mile, making a $200,000 payment limit a major barrier to families trying to recover. Raising that to match the Emergency Forest Restoration Program of $500,000 would go a long ways helping our producers rebuild.
Thank you very much. And whenever you see these kind of tragedies, it's heartbreaking to know these are people, their families, their livelihoods, and what it matters. The problem, as you mentioned, most of it is statutory regarding those limits. I can assure you we will use the resources of USDA. I appreciate your kind comments about the indemnity program, how quickly that was done. Oftentimes in some of these programs, we said, government's here to help you, and it's a year or 18 months later, and they're out of business by then. So I appreciate the work of our FSA people there on the ground and the indemnity providers, both from fencing and from livestock replacement and others. There are limits, and that's in your bailiwick to address. The ECP program, it's my understanding that we have exhausted the revenue in that as well, but I'll commit to you any flexibility we have in helping restore these people and mitigate their loss, we will execute.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're excited to hear your tone about trade and making an undersecretary dedicated to trade's a critical step. I want to echo that I feel like we have very successful market access program and the foreign market development program, that they're doing a great job, and we want to accentuate the positive that the government's doing. To that end, several of us have authored a program called the CREATE Act, which will also help fund that even further. In the meantime, we're hoping, and based on your words, you're going to be a champion for these programs as well, and I'm sure you're familiar with them. What can we do in Congress to help you do your job better, to help promote trade? What do you need from us to work with you side by side?
I have some ideas, but we're formulating that right now. Specifically, I don't know that I'm prepared to go there this morning, but I can assure you by the time the budget comes around, the Farm Bill comes around, we'll have specific requests over that in looking at the barriers that we feel like are to international trade. I think the ability to have this Undersecretary for Trade is one step that we can go and travel and be on their doorstep, knocking on their door, saying, what can we sell you today? So we'll have better, as I get into it, we'll have better idea of where the specific areas that we need help in, and we're not going to be very bashful about asking for it.
I'm sure in all your jobs you've done before, you're pretty familiar with the market access program and the foreign market development, and just want to know what your assessment of them is. I know you're very early, so I apologize for asking that so early in the process.
No, they are important, and that's one area where the Foreign Agricultural Service, our acting deputy secretary there now has been immensely helpful in the sugar negotiations, and our Secretary of Commerce, I think, would love to hire him away. He's been really helpful in the beef issue and other things, because he's just been like a right arm for them and helping them understand these markets on trade. I'm really proud that we've got people like that, career people there who understand that, know that. The market access program and helping people otherwise in the AMS is really important as well. I'll have more specific ideas about the needs and what we can ask for later on.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
Jim's time has expired. Ms. Plaskett, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here, and congratulations on your confirmation last month. We're very pleased to have you working with us on the issue of agriculture. First, of course, I have to touch on a local issue since I only have 5 minutes. Want to make sure that I take care of my people first.
That's what representative government's all about.
Well, let me, of course, first let you know everyone has invited you to their districts, but I have the best district to invite you to, the Virgin Islands. And we've extended that invitation as well to the chairman. Chairman Conway, with your additional responsibilities, I'm sure you need a field trip now to the Virgin Islands more than ever. Mr. Secretary, one of the things that our local farmers are concerned with, and I spoke with our Commissioner of Agriculture just recently about this, the USDA has many offices that service the Virgin Islands, but do so not in the islands themselves. For example, the Farm Service Agency support is funded and administered through Florida, and our NRCS services depend on the USDA staff housed in Puerto Rico. That's of particular concern to us because we are having a growing and burgeoning agriculture sector, and we want our farmers to have the technical support and the assistance that are needed. So we rely heavily on staff from Puerto Rico to travel to the Virgin Islands to provide that assistance, and we have had problems getting them to come to the Virgin Islands often enough due to travel restrictions, budget shortages, and for other reasons. For example, one of the key irrigation engineers has not been in the Virgin Islands in over 2 years, and there are others who have not been to the island of St. Thomas in over 3 years. If NRCS's Puerto Rico budget is further cut, the Virgin Islands stands to be set back even further from where we are in our rural economy and our rural growth. And I'm asking for a commitment from you and your office to work with me in our local agriculture office on issues of deficiencies and where we can meet the needs of access to USDA services for our farmers and also for our cooperative extension services at our university, which does an amazing job, but also lacks that support. And so I'd love to be able to call on you and those within your office to assist us in that.
I hope we can learn more about the specific issues and how we can maybe build a team to come and to assess that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't commit right now to redeploying assets there, not knowing where they are currently, but I can assure you that the burgeoning agricultural industry in Virgin Islands is really just as important as Puerto Rico or other places, and the technical expertise that you know is needed there, whether it be irrigation technology or other things, we look forward to providing. I'd love to get more specific information about those specific needs and look at deploying a team there to maybe hear from your people about how we can do a better job that way.
Great, I'd love that, would appreciate that. I know that there's been much discussion about the position in terms of rural development and how it's going to be administered. When you say, and just as this is probably the lawyer and me asking for specifics, if you say that the assistant secretary who's going to be dealing with rural development, that it will be a Senate confirmed, will that be below the undersecretary, or is that reporting directly to you? How would that structurally be done?
It's a good question. That assistant secretary will be a direct report to me. It will manage the three mission areas of rural development, both utilities and community facilities, water, and other areas there. They will report up to her. It will not be reporting to an undersecretary. The reason I wanted to elevate that, because as I indicated earlier, I don't consider myself a micromanager, but I do consider myself a hands-on manager.
Got you.
And this was an area of rural development with a lot of resources, the ability to provide leverage a lot of resources out to communities with, frankly, a good deal for the American taxpayer. It's negative subsidies in most of these cases. I'm very, very impressed with the banking experience of our rural development people in that regard. So
excellent.
I'm just curious enough and jealous enough, I wanted to be involved in that, and that was the best way I knew how to do that.
Excellent. And will that assistant secretary have other areas in their portfolio outside of rural development?
No, just that rural development piece. That's a pretty big chunk and a big responsibility. So I'm just going to be their assistant.
Thank you. And then the last thing was regarding rural broadband. When we talk about the minority leader in the Senate, I'm talking about an allotment for rural broadband deployment. And under the Senate proposal, rural broadband funding is going to be available to projects currently eligible under existing programs in the Department of Agriculture. Is your office going to be advocating for inclusion of supplemental rural broadband in the infrastructure package, or do you see an area in which we can support that?
As I indicated in the infrastructure meeting we had yesterday, rural broadband is at the top of the list, inland waterways, ports. They know that broadband enhances economic development, the connectivity out here in rural areas, and the executive order the president signed for rural prosperity. That's just as important as roads, water, sewer, and other things for economic development in today's society. Plus the sociological impact of just keeping kids there where they're connected.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Dr. Bacon, or General Bacon, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your confirmation. And we look forward to your leadership. And I'm not only a fellow veteran with the Air Force, I'm a fellow veteran picking watermelons, sweet corn, all that on the farm as a kid, too. It was a great upbringing. I think it was a good way to grow up.
It is a great way to grow up.
I think if I had to put the top issue in Nebraska for economic is trade. We're very dependent on our soybean trade, beef cattle, pork, and so forth. And with prices, down at 50%, supply high, and demand being, suppressed, the best thing we can do is open up those doors in China, Japan, perhaps Great Britain, after Brexit, get a trade deal with them. But I do hear a lot of concern talking to our agriculture community in Nebraska with some of the statements that have come out of the administration, whether it be NAFTA, TPP, and so forth. And yet I know there's a commitment to bilateral trade, but can you just give some confidence to the Nebraskans that our administration is bore-sighted on this, that they know the importance of agriculture and the trade of our agriculture products overseas? Thank you.
I really hope that's already been demonstrated with the President's decision on NAFTA, knowing that NAFTA is very important to Nebraska and that middle part of the country, and how agriculture has benefited from that NAFTA agreement, as well as the agreement with China. You grow a few cows in Nebraska, and they're going to benefit from opening that market as well. So hopefully we're on the way. And as Secretary Ross likes to say, we've only just begun. Mm-hmm. So I take him at his word on that, and we've got a lot of things that we do very well, and I hope we can get those things done as well. But I think, I'm an outcome kind of guy. I'm again, show me rather than tell me kind of thing. So hopefully we're showing.
Oh, well, thank you on that. I do believe that is our number one economic issue for Nebraska. And I think if I had to put a top 3 issue for our cattlemen and our pork producers, it is foot and mouth disease. So I want to thank you for your commitment here today already, saying that you want to make sure that we have the right safety plan in place and a precaution that could, prevent a catastrophe if that breaks out. That would put us back for years if that happened. And I hear a lot about it from our cattlemen and our pork producers. But the last thing I just want to ask you is concerning the SNAP program. I've probably met with about 100 different employers of different industries in the Omaha area, and their top concern is being able to hire full-time employees. They get a lot of part-time requests, but they're having a hard time filling their employment roles with full-time work. And they think, or many of them think, it's the cliff effect with a lot of the programs that we have, that if you earn over a certain amount, all of a sudden you lose all your benefits. So they would like to see a more tapered decline as you earn. Do you think our SNAP program has that built in, or do we need to do more work on that to ensure a more gradual decline as you earn more? Is there more work that we could do there, in your opinion?
I think that's a good point, and many people have talked about that. We know that the SNAP benefits are not that large anyway, but what we try to do in Georgia was give people a step out with using some of our resources over training and transportation, child care, in order for them to get a job. But I think I would welcome the consideration of a tiered pathway down rather than jumping off a cliff in that way. And I think that could have the effect of being more encouraging for people looking for work in doing that, knowing we've had some anecdotes about people not wanting to take a job because they would lose benefits. And I think if we had a tiered approach of doing that, would make more sense.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned, I've had 3 different roundtables with probably around 100 employers, and that was the consensus as being the number one issue that they're facing, at least in the urban area. So I appreciate your consideration on that. With that, I just want to commit to you that this committee and we look forward to working with you. What your position and what you do has a tremendous impact on our state, and we thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Appreciate the promotion, but I'm chairman. Gentleman, Ms. Adams, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for being here. I want to get back to HBCUs. I'm a proud graduate twice of North Carolina A&T and taught for 40 years on the campus of Bennett College in Greensboro. And so I know that we have a unique relationship in the Department of Agriculture with the 1890 land grants. And in the next Farm Bill and through other legislation that comes to Congress, I want us to focus on the things that we can do to help prepare these universities, which in many of the places where they're located, they are the economic engines in their communities. And one issue I want to raise with you today is the level of state matching funding that 1890s received for grants from USDA. Currently, North Carolina A&T, which is an 1890 institution, receives less state matching funding for grants from NIFA than their fellow 1862 institutions in the state of North Carolina, like North Carolina State University. And so while North Carolina State University receives well above a 1-1 match from the General Assembly, I served there for 20 years, A&T receives a 0.8 to 1 in funding that it needs to meet the federal matching requirements. It's my understanding, Mr. Secretary, that the states have to submit a work plan to NIFA that outlines how 1890s and 1862s will use the funding that they receive from USDA and from their state. So my question is, would you support your department publicly disclosing how much total funding by state that 1890s and 1862s receive so that we can determine what state governments are doing to match the federal commitment and hold them accountable for the level of funding that's provided to the land-grant schools?
I think that constituency has done a good job promoting their issue to the president, and I've heard his commitment as well. And obviously from USDA's perspective, we believe in transparency over knowing if you're going to be facts-based, data-driven, you need to share those information, let people know what facts and data you're making decisions on. So certainly, we'd be happy to disclose that. That's within every person's right to know.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask a question about SNAP. And so as we approach the next Farm Bill, we've had continuous discussion from key congressional leaders that SNAP program could be reauthorized separately from the Farm Bill. Do you support a 5-year Farm Bill that includes the SNAP program in its current form and does not convert SNAP to a block grant program?
I think it would be very unwise for Congress to try to promote a separate farm bill without SNAP included. I just think that the coalition between the advocates for food nutrition as well as agriculture is a strong coalition to do that, and I think it'd be unwise to do otherwise.
Thank you. I support that. Hurricane Matthew was devastating to cotton farmers in North Carolina last fall who are already struggling from losses in 2015. So what's the status of proposed changes by the Risk Management Agency for the quality loss adjustment standard for cotton?
I think that's, in my opinion, that's one of the areas they missed the mark on, and as I've told you, that those 17 contracts are already issued, and we can't change that because that's an insurance product and you're dealing with other people's money. But I can assure you I will have my voice heard in the 18 contracts regarding the quality loss on crops.
Okay.
Cotton being treated like other crops are with degradation of quality.
Great. One last point. A strong rural economy is necessary for healthy economic growth in urban communities like Charlotte. I represent Charlotte. Should we be expecting additional cuts to rural programs, specifically those that promote food access?
I missed that. If that was a question, please repeat.
Well, in terms of should we be expecting additional cuts to rural programs, specifically those that promote food access?
I hope not.
I hope not, too. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
You and I have a bond, Congressman. My grandmother's name was Alma.
All right, that means sold. Good woman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The lady yields back. John Faso, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Governor, congratulations. Look forward to working with you. I represent a district in upstate New York in the mid-Hudson Valley and the Catskills. Goes from Hyde Park to Cooperstown, from Vermont to Pennsylvania. It's a large rural area, and I very much appreciate your nomination and confirmation, and I hope that you won't forget places like upstate New York. You know, sometimes folks from other parts of the country think New York and they think New York City and urban. Well, we have a lot of rural areas in upstate New York. as
Beautiful
well.
upstate.
And your agency has been helpful to us on certain flood mitigation projects and rehab projects with the National Conservation Service. And also your recent issuance of a guideline on food nutrition, allowing flavored milk in school and lunch programs, vitally important to a part of the country where our dairy farmers look perplexed at the fact that the USDA will restrict certain milk products in school lunch programs. And I've always thought it's unusual that the same USDA that says you can't sell whole milk or flavored milk or have it in a lunch program allows us to purchase $3 billion worth of soda in the SNAP program. I've yet to hear anyone say that soda has any nutritional benefit, and yet we do that. The thing my farmers keep, and many of the apple growers and other farmers keep raising with me, is the difficulty in getting the seasonal agricultural workers into the country. And there's a lot of complaints about the time and the effort and the expense of dealing with the Labor Department, and I'm wondering if you have an opinion on how we could expedite these H-2A visa and that process, because my farmers trying to harvest apples in the fall this year are not going to be able to hire locals, because locals, as you alluded to previously, will not do that work. And it's vital that we are able to bring seasoned agricultural workers who have experience and knowledge to work on these farms throughout our region. Could you respond to that?
I'd be happy to. I'm aware, obviously personally and through my briefing here, that the H-2A program has been essentially unworkable with recent additions in that way. We're familiar. We've got a lot of H-2A utilization in Georgia, and I know from growers that it's become much more burdensome, much more expensive to comply with that. This person I mentioned earlier that we had hired with farm labor experience has been directed by me to look at the H-2A program, see if that's the vehicle we need to go through currently before we can get maybe a broader farm labor resolution. And we're going to be working on that, presenting the administration and you all some ideas on, from a regulatory perspective, how we can streamline H-2A to be a more dependable source, a more reliable source, and of immigrant labor to harvest those crops.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, because this is truly vital. And I talked to an apple grower in my area in Columbia County in Kinderhook, my hometown, just yesterday, who told me that the prospects of a great harvest this year are looking well, and they're very encouraged. But if they can't get the workers to help harvest this crop, it is going to be for naught. And so I hope you will take this back to the administration and to the president and tell them it's vitally important that we have a stream of workers who can come into the country and perform these seasonal tasks. It's critical to our economy in my district, and I know in districts all across the country.
Agree wholeheartedly, and the good news is I do think that's the president's heart, and we'll continue to be very strong, voracious advocates in that regard.
Right. Thank you so much. And if we can just remind folks here in Washington, D.C. that September and October are just around the corner. We need these workers here in this country. We can't wait till the last minute. We've got to give certainty to our farmers. I very much appreciate your service as governor of Georgia and your service now to our country as Secretary of Agriculture, and I look forward to working with you in your department. Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Custer?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to echo the words of my colleague. Welcome. Thank you very much for your service to our country. I hope you'll find this to be one of the bipartisan committees on Capitol Hill, and in particular, so many of the things that both of my colleagues have mentioned on both sides of the aisle I echo in my district in New Hampshire. I want to focus in, I see that in this skinny budget, 21% funding reduction to USDA, so I imagine a lot of the discussion today has been taken up by that. In particular, one program was eliminated that has been very, very effective in northern New England, and the name of that is the Northern Border Regional Commission. Are you familiar with that, Mr. Secretary?
Does that have to do with the restoration projects or northern? I'm not sure I am.
It's funding, frequently we use it in my district, communities do in conjunction with rural development funding, and it has the same kind of leveraging impact. It's a grant program for primarily economic development. I represent in the northern part of my district a region that was heavily dependent on paper mills, furniture, that kind of thing, manufacturing that's left the area. And just to give you a sense of this, the former Groveton Mill in a very small town called Northumberland received funding from the Northern Border Commission to repurpose the mill into an industrial park that's now attracting new manufacturing jobs. Many of them companies from Canada moving to the United States to make products in America and help the middle class make it in America. So I would just ask you if you would go back and talk to your team about the Northern Border Regional Commission and urge you to support funding. The leveraging impact alone is really extraordinary. I'm just looking at the awards in 2016, $1.8 million awarded, $19.5 million in matching funds. So a small amount of money goes a long way, and I know you're frugal with our tax dollars as I am.
I do understand more now. I didn't recognize the name, but it's very similar to what we've done in the South with the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Yes.
Been very involved. I chaired that governor part of that issue, and I can tell you the good it's done in through that area. I'm not familiar with the northern, but it sounds like a very similar commission.
Very similar.
So I'm very similar with
It's
the
modeled
impact
after
and
the
effect of it.
Appalachian.
So what states are impacted by the northern border?
Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York State.
Well, I'm very familiar with the good that can be done through those commissions. So
It's really been an incredible program, so I urge your support. I also wanted to focus in continuing that line on the USDA Rural Development Program, and I note in my briefing that this is being moved around somewhat in your organization, and I won't spend a lot of time on it because I need to get to two other questions, but I would urge you that the Rural Development Program is critical. And right now, I'm the bipartisan co-chair of what we call the Heroin Task Force. We have 85 members of Congress working in a bipartisan way. Rural America is just being slammed by loss of manufacturing jobs, by this influx of heroin and opioids, and we cannot do without the economic development, the health care, all of the different types of development from rural development, including an amendment that I was able to get on the Farm Bill that those funds can be used for community colleges. So I can get back to you offline with that because I do want to, my time is very limited. I'm going to submit a letter to the record in support of the Organic Livestock and Poultry Practices Rule signed by 334 certified organic beef, pork, dairy, and poultry producers representing $2 billion in sales. We made great progress in the last Farm Bill for organics in a bipartisan way, and I hope we can work with you.
Certainly. The question?
I hope we'll be able to work with you going forward in the Farm Bill in support of organic trade.
No question. I think it's been a great consumer win for a lot of people, and smaller organic farmers have given them an opportunity to get in the marketplace, and sometimes now we may see, and that's the issue over making sure they're certified. We see some of them may be crowded out with larger operations as well.
Well, I look forward to working with you. I'll yield back, but I do want to submit that letter for the record. Thank you very much.
Gentlelady's time expired. Mr. Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congrats, Mr. Secretary, on a distinguished career in public service. And thank you for your willingness to serve our country and make the sacrifices. I notice you have 14 grandchildren, so you do have other things you could do.
That's right.
So thanks for choosing to continue to serve and being the chief advocate for the ag industry in the United States. And I'm proud of our president, who has put the philosophy, overarching philosophy on his decision-making of America first, American manufacturers, American producers. And I was giving my colleague a hard time in the hallway. I said, if the Secretary, if he enjoys the Virgin Islands, he's going to love West Texas. It says there's an ocean of cotton out there, as you know. And thank you for being so gracious about taking my call the other day.
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat some things because it's too important. It's life and death for my region, and that is our cotton producers. And West Texas and agriculture is life. It's our identity. But cotton is king, and all ag producers are struggling. You know that for all the reasons that you already know. But cotton is the only commodity out of Title I, just completely exposed to the market risks and volatility and market manipulation that we've seen from China and others. And it's a crisis. And I'm just asking you and pleading with you, Mr. Secretary, move with the speed of the crisis and the sense of urgency that our producers, our economy, cotton ginners, farm implement dealers, ag lenders, it's devastating, devastating. And you know, one of the most sobering and enlightening experiences I've had is when we had a panel here of experts, ag economists, and I asked the question, could you use the same rationale that the World Trade Organization with the Brazil case, could you use the same rationale, or could someone make the case for other commodities using the same rationale that would ultimately lead to pulling corn or sorghum or wheat? And the answer was unequivocally yes. Someone could make the same case on how we support other commodities in this country and could cause us to pull them from Title I. If we're not willing to do that to all commodities, we shouldn't be willing to do it to one. And so I apologize because I had another hearing. I'd like to hear your thoughts about cotton and the devastation and the crisis and what you can do. And I know that there are different avenues, and I implore you to look at all strategies to save cotton production as we know it in America.
Thank you very much. As I told you on the phone the other day, we're well aware of that. Certainly the best thing is that we continue cotton prices to continue upward. That's the ultimate solution. The good news is supply-demand is improving with more consumption than production recently. So all those are good news, but that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that producers are already hurting. I know that, as I understand it, there was a decision among the integrated cotton industry based on the FTO adjudication earlier that they would prefer not to poke that in the eye regarding being in Title I. Unfortunately, the STAX program was not as successful as you all, Congress, had hoped it would be, and that brought some issues. The disappointing part is the final deliberations of the budget reconciliation bill limited my options severely. But I will commit to you that within the statutory authority, within the budgetary authority of the USDA Secretary, I'm going to do everything I can. The problem is I don't want to give false hope because those options are really limited, and we talked about those.
Yeah. Thank you for that response. And if I achieve anything as the representative from West Texas, District 19, I hope it's working with you to find relief for our cotton farmers and equity in the treatment of cotton as a commodity relative to the others. I was at a Texas and Southwest cattle raisers event the other day when we announced that China opening up their markets to our U.S. beef. Could you comment on that and kind of the next steps, please? And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
We're obviously optimistic and excited about the potential of getting back into China, our beef into China. That's important to Texas as well, and much of the Southwest. We don't want to, exalt too much just yet. Exalt in that we've got some work to do from a protocol perspective. We got some work to do from technical, but I believe that we and they are very serious about this, and we'll do the victory dance hopefully pretty soon.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. Mr. Davis, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. As we know, there's never any geographical turf battle when it comes to agriculture. But as somebody who comes from the Midwest, I have heard nothing but compliments about your appointment as Secretary of Agriculture. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of hope out there that your experience and what you can bring to the position is going to be very beneficial for our farmers in the Midwest and also agriculture as a whole. I want to say thanks again, and as the subcommittee chairman of the Biotech, Horticulture, and Research Subcommittee, I'm especially interested in the research title and among the other issues that we deal with on that committee, because I represent the land-grant university. I call it the best land-grant university ever, the University of Illinois, but also non-land-grant universities like the Illinois State University that rely upon a very robustly funded ag research program. It's my belief, too, that investing in research today will save us costs tomorrow, especially when it comes to agriculture. And I saw that the President's 2018 budget blueprint indicates that it supports farmer-focused research and extension partnerships at land-grant universities and requests $350 million for AFRI. And furthermore, it indicates that the Ag Research Services funding should be focused on high-priority agriculture and food issues. Mr. Secretary, I know that my colleague Austin Scott and my other colleague Jimmy Panetta mentioned ag research earlier in the hearing. Can you expand on your responses there and give us even more perspective of how you feel research should be funded when it comes to agriculture?
Well, as an advocate for agriculture generally, and also aware that research, extension, the transfer of applied and basic research to the field has been the reason for our wonderful productivity in Illinois and other parts of the nation regarding that. We've produced our way into a surplus that we are suppressing prices. Now we've got to sell it. But the fact is we can't stop research because the challenge of feeding 9 billion people by 2050 will be insurmountable if we don't have the new technology, the genetics and other things it will take to feed a hungry world. So we're going to be an advocate for research, basic research, applied research, the applied extension of those best practices out in the field to help to preserve the environment and help to produce more. So I don't know how else to expand on it to let you know that as a product of public education from the high school to the public land-grant university, I'm a big believer.
Well, thank you. And I know that you've been here a long time. I've shuttled back and forth between 2 different hearings today, and you've sat there answering every question, and I know how difficult that is, and I appreciate that and appreciate your candor. I'm glad you mentioned biotech, another one of the areas that my subcommittee has jurisdiction over. Technology is approved in the United States, but not approved internationally. As we know, they face serious risk and uncertainty when we try and operate in agriculture in the global marketplace. And that sometimes prevents some of my farmers in Illinois from gaining access to that global marketplace. Last week, the administration released a statement detailing the priorities of the 100-day action plan with China, and it contained a commitment to review pending agricultural biotechnologies. And many of these pending applications have been waiting for more than 5 years for Chinese approval. Is there anything you can do or anything you're planning to do to ensure that China's held accountable when they review these products in this 100-day plan?
Well, the biotech issue is right up there with beef and working out these issues with the 8 traits that we're looking for clearance into that. I think we've demonstrated on our part the science that confirms these are safe products, and beef and biotech go hand in hand. So I think for the assurance our U.S. producers can have that these are exportable, they won't be embargoed, they won't be denied as we're having right now into some markets. And I think when we get that done with China, we can persuade other markets over the safety and the efficacy of these products into their food chain supply.
Well, I look forward to working with you to address these very important issues in the next Farm Bill. And obviously, the Midwest is very concerned about who is going to be the administrator at the RMA. So I look forward to working with you there, too. I yield back.
Thank you. Jim yields back. Mr. Allen, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, Secretary, congratulations. It's great to have a fellow Georgian sitting here at this table. And of course, we go way back. I was with you in Georgia I was working in the business in a small business environment when you under your leadership as governor. And boy, all I can say is you like a challenge. Because for my colleagues' benefit, I think Georgia lost in 2008 something like 360,000 jobs, and because we were very dependent on the home building industry. We lost over 41 banks. It was a critical economic time in Georgia, much like we have in this country today and we have in agriculture today. Now Georgia has been named as the best state to locate your business for 4 years in a row, and we've had a growth of about 500,000 jobs. And I think because of your leadership, that's why Georgia's where we are today. We do have a number of challenges. I mean, we've all talked about that, but I think you're certainly up to the challenge. You and I had a good time at the airport while we were waiting for a flight to talk a little bit about why we were doing this. I have 12 grandchildren, so I know what you're missing, and I may get to 14, I don't know, but I hope so. But so I know the great sacrifice that you're making, and also you, like me, were still in the business, so you have to have good folks back home taking care of that. But thank you for what you're doing for this country. Agriculture, and to talk about the 12th district, the 12th district, we can't have peanuts without cotton. I mean, one is totally dependent on the other. So we have a great program in peanuts, PLC program. Everybody likes that program. We got nothing in cotton. And we've got some real challenges that you know well. I don't need to, and we've talked about that at length here today. Obviously, thank you for your help as far as the freeze with our blueberry crop and also with some of the storm damage we've had down there in the USGA. And of course, we talked about the importance of rural broadband, and those are, I think, probably similar in every district. But the one thing I thought I might share with you is a couple of things that our office has been working on here is the Barn Act, which would move the H-2A program from the Department of Labor to the Department of Agriculture. And you might comment on that as far as what your thoughts are. We've also introduced legislation on the WOTUS rule, although the President has rescinded that and it's been tied up in the courts. We want to codify that in law so that law is understood exactly what a navigable waterway is. And the thing I've observed, and frankly, I didn't realize, I mean, when you walk in a grocery store, just like turning on the light switch, you just expect the food to be there. And we have this tremendous tension in the country between our metro, urban, and really our rural areas, particularly among taxpayers, particularly when it comes to helping our farmers, sustain our farmers. And so we got the Farm Bill coming up. It's always contentious. It divides a lot of the country. And somehow, from an education standpoint, people need to understand that food just doesn't appear, and that quality of food doesn't appear. I mean, the strides that this country has made in what we've done in agriculture is enormous. And frankly, the farmers have very little influence because they're such a small part of the population now. You know, 100 years ago, we were 97% of the population. Today, we're 2%. So your thoughts on that? And again, thank you for taking on this challenge.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate your patience and sitting here and listening to the conversations. But all of these things are important, certainly, and trade is important. You mentioned the difference between the different programs. I think we'll have to address that in the next Farm Bill. But food safety, all those things are important. This is an awesome opportunity that we're looking forward to, and how we do. You know, you represent a lot of educational opportunities in your district as well, and we want to make sure that research continues. But these are all challenging things, but I think the education part that you talked about between urban and rural, we're really all in this together. And I think the more help we can help people understand that food literally is a national security issue, I think the insurance program helps it to be more palatable to the public out there as an insurance rather than a direct payment. Maybe, you know, the mantra of, you know, being paid not to farm, that does away with that. So I think we've made progress in the 14 Farm Bill. Can we do better? Yes. Will we do better? Yes.
Good.
Thank
you. And please know that you have my full support. Any way that I can help you, I'd be glad to do it. Now yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. Governor Lujan Grissom, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, it's an honor to have you here, and I'm lucky to have a gracious chairman who makes sure that I always have an opportunity to weigh in, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you. I want to talk about a bill and an issue. The issue is lunch shaming. It's gotten lots of national attention, Mr. Secretary, and it may be something that you're already aware of. And last week, I introduced a bill in Congress with my colleague and good friend, the chairman of the Biotech Subcommittee, Rodney Davis, and I'm the ranking member, and so we've got great opportunities to work together. And in a nutshell, basically, it's getting at schools who are having trouble, clearly, with the number of students and whose families can't afford the lunch. And instead of figuring that out and working with the parents or looking at programs or making sure that it's a SNAP benefit or whatever else it is, many districts around the country engage in lunch shaming, which means they throw away those lunches for those kids. And I'm going to, in a minute, I'll just do it actually right now. I mean, we've got an article, Mr. Chairman, in the New York Times and a photo of a stamp placed on one such student's arm that says, "I need lunch money." And the school was stamping all of these kids. And I would move that we put this into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Thank you. And there are other and very similar, very draconian practices around the country. And New Mexico is the first state in the country to now ban lunch shaming at a state level. I certainly want to ban lunch shaming at a federal level. And given that I know that your desire, based on your earlier testimony, even though I wasn't in the hearing, paying attention to the hearing, so thank you, that you're concerned about poor Americans and making sure that the SNAP program is available and really looking at strategies that shore those up and others. I'm interested in what your personal opinion is and or knowledge about lunch shaming in this country.
I'd be very interested, Congresswoman, to work with you over maybe some technology that we can help with our lunch programs around the country to figure out how the reasonable expectation of payment versus the inability to pay could be dealt with rather than confronting kids in a line or else humiliating them in some way. Middle school's tough enough as it is, but we want to make sure our adults or those in authority in particular are not contributing to those issues in that way. I don't know if there's a technological answer or what the ultimate answer is to balance the expectation of whatever contribution there is, rather than being confronted in a public way in a shaming or a humiliating way to do that. So I
And
look
I don't
forward
know
to
whether there's direct authority at USDA. I would encourage you to look at it. I would love to have the department's support on the lunch shaming bill, and I don't disagree that making sure that schools are better equipped to look at what their lunch program costs and to look at what's occurring with families who aren't paying or can't afford, which is a combination. But to make it the student's problem, and to do two things. I mean, two things occur in this environment that are very troubling to me. One, that you would force these kids to work in the cafeteria, that you would throw away their food, that you would stamp them, that you would highlight that they're kids who aren't paying for their lunch, who are poor, and then you don't give them a lunch. Both things happen to these kids in school. There is no reason, it seems to me, that we should allow any school to make this the problem of the child. We're just creating more problems in our school system. I understand that we got to deal with the money aspects, but I agree with you. That seems to me to be completely and entirely separate. And what's really shocking for me is that it's such a prevalent problem. I'm embarrassed to admit to my colleagues on this committee that in addition to my own state that was engaged in lunch shaming, I had no idea that it was a national phenomenon. And part of it is we're so strict, I guess, in terms of making sure that schools account for the lunch program in a way that instead of dealing with parents and finding creative solutions, that they feel perfectly justified in treating their students in this way. And in fact, it's led to the loss of jobs where food workers have refused to come to work and have quit because they're told they have to lunch shame. So I'd love a partnership to say we're not going to stand for that as a country.
Well, again, as no respecter of persons, with our motto of do good and feed everyone, I think that also means you treat everyone with respect, irrespective of their ability, their economic ability. How we figure out direction to our lunchroom professionals over technology of things that work. I'd welcome the opportunity to work with you on solutions about that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Last time expired. Well, Governor, you survived your first one. I don't remember a full committee hearing in which every single member showed up for some period of time at your hearing, and almost everybody used up their 5 minutes. Thank you. Your stamina is well admired. We're going to have hopefully a long time together working on a variety of issues that we've all talked about this morning and ad infinitum. G.T. Thompson was here. He has a question submitted for the record, a couple. I'll submit those for you. If you could get back to G.T. on those. I'm also looking forward to, I think you had like a 180-day window on your rural task force to get that. I think all of us are anxious to see that report as you begin to draw all those other agencies together to take a look at things that can affect positively or things we can do to address the negative effects that are out there. Clearly, Jody and I and Rick have got an issue with cotton. Thank you very much. I'd like to one last shot across the bow at our Senate colleagues. We had an elegant solution for cotton that should have been in the omnibus bill. And just because you don't represent cotton farmers in Michigan and New Hampshire is no reason for you to have taken them hostage to get something that you knew would never work. And that was a dairy solution that was unpaid for about the tune of $800 million. And so while service on the House Agriculture Committee, I don't know what it is in the Senate, but in the House Agriculture Committee, you're required to represent all of agriculture, not just the folks who directly vote for you. And while that is happening right now with Jody and I, that did not happen when the Senate stabbed our cotton farmers in the back because they couldn't come up with their own solution for dairy. And pitting one segment of our industry against the other has never worked, except when you want to use it as a tool to get your own way. It was what happened in the Senate with Senator Stabenow and Leahy. Shame on them. Other than that, I don't have any real strong feelings about that issue. But Governor, thank you so very much.
Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, our first date went very well and splendidly, as a matter of fact, and you've got my number. I hope you'll call again.
Well, I do have one thing. You sent me an emoji message, and I don't sabi emoji, so I'm gonna have to get with you and ask you to figure out what you were sending me. That was under the rules of the committee. That today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material, supplementary written responses from the witnesses for any questions posed by a member. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you doing, Rick? Thank you.